What's the worst thing a house guest has done in your home? He said he had to go to the bathroom. After 20 minutes I decided to go see if he was okay. Found him on my mother's computer watching pee and jerking it. I honestly don't know what kind of insatiable horniness would have to come over you to not be able to hold off until later. Must have been some crazy hormonal little kid, I'm guessing. Bought one of those birthday cakes at the grocery store for my wife's upcoming birthday that is packaged in one of those boxes with the little see-through plastic window. Friend eats all the cake outside the viewing area of that window so that when I open the box there is only a little square left. Bastard. I'm sorry, that is absolutely horrid, but the sheer conniving genius of that is hilarious. So this happened around 2 years ago. A roommate's friend stayed over on our futon after a night out. My other roommate and I had never met her until the next morning. I was studying in the kitchen when she came in and asked for a dish towel. I thought that was kind of weird, but I handed her one. Soon after, she left. That was the only interaction I had with her. We started noticing a really awful smell throughout the house. It smelled like Satan's butthole. I went to the bathroom to investigate. The toilet was full of crappy water. It took several attempts and lots of gagging to unclog it. We cleaned the bathroom thoroughly and thought that would be the end of it. This was just the tip of the shitberg. The crap smell lingered over the next few days. We didn't know what to make of it. One night, after a couple drinks, we sat down on the futon, on top of the blankets we kept there, with Cool Runnings and some chips and salsa. A few minutes into the movie, we started getting whiffs of the smell. They became stronger and stronger. We pulled back the blankets and recoiled in horror at the sight of the perpetrator. This chick almost certainly diarrheaed, chunkily, might I add, all up on our futon. Not only that, she covered it up and didn't say a word. We were pretty happy to find the culprit, but also horrified by the events that transpired. TLDR. Found diarrhea in futon 3 days after house guest left. Warm runnings. My father-in-law is unfortunately an butthole who happened to stay at my home once. My so and I cooked dinner. It was something with a tomato sauce, and after a dinner full of father-in-law making xenophobic, chauvinistic, bigoted butthole statements, we went to clean up. The kitchen sink and dishwasher are maybe 10 feet from where he is sitting. I was taking my plate to the sink while making eye contact with and talking to my that is, not looking at father-in-law. He apparently held out his plate full of tomato sauce for me to take to the sink right there and I didn't notice. After I didn't take it, his response was to flip the plate upside down onto the white carpet. He didn't apologize or say oops or try to clean it up. His response was to cross his arms over his fat body and frown. He has not been invited back since, although whenever we're frustrated we now say frick it, plate flip. If it were with me, let's just hope he had a plate shaped anus. We were going out of town for the weekend and a friend asked if he could stay at our house, since he lived with his parents in the country and it saved tremendously on commute to his job. Plus that way he could actually go to a party and drink with the option of taking a cab ride home that didn't cost close to $100. I jokingly said just as long as you don't nail a one night stand in my bed, and he waved it off since he didn't have much luck with the ladies. Plus he planned on sleeping on the couch anyway. From what I could tell when I came home afterward, there was a fermenting rotting glass of our best liquor stash in my bedroom. He was thoughtful enough to not want to leave a water ring on our St. Vinny's dresser, so he used a white silk shirt from my drawer as a coaster for their red whatever drink he had concocted. Then, judging by the state of my bedsheets, which he had not bothered to change, he and his lady friend slaughtered a chicken together in bed. When I brought up these facts, he basically acted like I was a bee for not being happy that he got laid. That's not a friend. That's a douchebag, you know. My cousin, let's call him JC, was traveling cross country for work and decided to make an impromptu stop in Denver for a few days. I didn't mind cause I like having friends' family around. He was to arrive on a Monday and I didn't take time off so I'd be working in the day but afternoons and evenings were mostly free. The first day or two of him being there went fine until a Wednesday night that he tells me he wants to get out of the apartment. Mind you, it was already after 8 PM and I have to be up for work at 4:30 AM. So, JC decides to call a cab and just go to a bar for a little bit. I wasn't really for it, but I didn't want to hold him back from seeing some of the city. I give him my address and a spare key. He leaves with the cabbie around 9 PM. Fast freaking forward to 2 AM. I get woken up by a call from my cousin. Fricked up, asking to open the door. I'm like, what the frick? You have the key, and he responds, open the door. I'm knocking. I tell him, JC, I don't hear you knocking. Where the frick are you? This went on for about 20 plus minutes of trying to get a drunken moron to make sense on the phone. I decided to throw on some clothes and drive around the community, simultaneously talking to him on the phone and looking for a drunk bastard knocking on some random person's door. After much circling around, I find a cop car with 2 cops walking towards an apartment building, not far from mine. I get out and walk towards them. The cop approaches me and asks if I know the guy, and I tell the cop the truth of how it all played out. They tell me to stay by my car while they talk to him. A few minutes pass and JC stumbles over while the cops tell me to take him immediately. JC, in his drunken wisdom, was banging on the door of an apartment with a single mom and 2 children. He lost my goddamn apartment key, which they were kind enough to replace without charge. He raged in my apartment and threatened to kick my butt. He then proceeded to pass out until I got back from work around 5 PM. I did not get any sleep that night after 2 AM. I know you'll read this. JC, I love you, but goddamn I wanted to kill you that night. And that was the story of Jesus Christ's return. One time my friend was really drunk, and instead of getting up and walking to the bathroom, he tried to fight it off. Only he couldn't. He randomly stood up from my couch and spray puked everywhere. I'm talking exorcist style puke. He managed to hit every single electronic device in the room. 360, PS3, TV, and PC, as he attempted to run out of the room while he was still puking. I was furious. He didn't even offer to clean up or anything. He just went home. Needless to say, I don't invite him over when he's drunk anymore. I once took 6 shots of 151 within 15 minutes. Right before the 7th one, I projectiled all over my friend's table and carpet and then passed out. When I woke up, I saw that his wife already cleaned up. I gave her a $100 for her birthday that year. I had a roommate who liked to throw parties when I wasn't home. One Halloween I went out to a party and came home at 2 AM to find a Rager party at my own house. There were these douchey guys who were older than us in high school and always beat people up for no reason at the party. I wanted to kick everyone out, but I was scared of them. I went to use my toilet and someone had dumped the contents of my bathroom's garbage, cardboard, plastic, TP, into the toilet and then taken a nasty diarrhea crap all over it. Seeing that, I went into rage mode and kicked everyone the frick out. My roommate was passed out drunk and I didn't want the stuff to just sit and fester in the toilet, so I convinced a drunk girl to hold a plastic bag while I scooped out the crap garbage out of the toilet with a ladle. I didn't want to plug the toilet by flushing random garbage. TLDR, had to buy a new ladle. That drunk girl sounds like a keeper. You should give her a call. When I was living in an apartment, my toilet broke. The manager was coming within the hour to fix it. My boyfriend, at the time, decided to take a dump, knowing the toilet was broken. So, he shoots and just walks out the door and leaves. I have to clean it up before the manager got there. Obviously, we broke up. There is just no going back from that. I guess you could say he puts on sunglasses, dumped, would grab himself a hot dog at our BBQ, run to the toilet, shove it down there and repeat the process until it was clogged. Not really sure why he did it. I'd love to know what he thought he'd achieve when he was done. He was 21 years old. If someone kept stealing my hot dogs and running to the bathroom, I'd be relieved that he was putting them in the toilet. It wasn't my home, but it was a beach house my family had rented. First, this drunk butthole pointed at a friend's stomach, a girl, who was most certainly not fat, and said, "You are too fat." Then, while talking to my brother-in-law and his friend, both Navy F-14 pilots, he said, "Think you guys could teach me to fly?" "Sure," they said in good humor. "Okay, you teach me to fly and I will teach you how to be an engineer like me." I guess he felt like they were one-upping him and trying to belittle them. The guy did this kind of crap all night, including basically groping my wife and half the girls at the party. At the end of the night, I had gone to bed. My sister had retired to her room. She said she was getting undressed when he barged into the room. She said, "Get out of here," and that he replied, "You know you want me to be here." At which point she screamed for help. My brother-in-law and his friends were among the last people up. Those Navy pilots can really drink, and so they ran into the room following the screams and grabbed the guy. I was coming out of my room by then, awakened by the screams, and watched as they dragged the butthole out onto the balcony. It was a 3-story house. They pushed the guy against the railing and acted like they were about to lift him over it. My brother-in-law's friend says to him, "Either you get the frick out of here and never come back, or your first flying lesson is tonight." Double quote. Your brother-in-law's friend wins the baddest line award for the day. When I was 7, a friend stayed the night. I have a water bed. We fall asleep on said water bed. I wake up the next morning soaking wet. Friend says waterbed has a leak. I was covered in pee. Frick you, Carl, you pee on my Power Ranger bed sheets and made me sleep in your own pee. This sounds strangely what my brother Carl would do. My mother-in-law was staying at our house. In the middle of the night I hear her get up and then hear my garage door open. There being absolutely no reason for her to be out there. I get up to go see if she needs anything. I open the door and find her crouching over a cup peeing. I startled her, which caused her to drop the cup, spilling her fresh urine all over my garage floor. Her explanation was that someone, my husband, was in the only bathroom. That would fly, except she didn't even knock on the door. She just saw the door closed and went straight to peeing in a cup in the garage. Oh wow, I've never met someone with a similar story to mine before. My grandmother peed all over my bedroom carpet. She was staying in my bedroom, which is right next to the bathroom, but decided that she didn't want to disturb anyone with a flush in the middle of the night, so she got out a torch and decided to try and pee into a yogurt pot instead. She missed. Teenage sister-in-law moved in with us and is a certified hoarder. Like, as bad as the people on the hoarding TV shows, but it was confined to her room. We're dropping her off at college this week, and I kind of want to give her new roommate a heads up, but it's probably not my place. I'll probably tell the RA. I don't want to sour the roomie's impression of her right off the bat. This is actually my SIL's sophomore year, but first year with a roommate. She claims that she kept her room neat last year, but I never saw it, and when she came back to our house this summer, it was garbage city again. She needs to get therapy to deal with it. It's not your place to tell her new college roommate, but she's going to have an awful time at college when her roommate hates her. Several years ago, when my wife and I would go out of town, we'd have one of my friends, ex-friend now, house pet sit for us. I'd known him for a few years and he seemed like a pretty cool guy. He had free reign of the house, including access to my PC, but every time we got back, I'd inevitably have a virus on my computer. Finally had enough and installed a keylogger to see why. Found out that he was logging into chat rooms posing at a 13-year-old girl who was into bestiality and also downloading kiddie pee. Update. I had a lot of the same questions that many of you have brought up concerning the fact that the data was on my computer, and the fact that I was a new dad with a 6-month-old daughter. I was very scared of being tracked down and possibly losing my daughter over something that I had nothing to do with. After discussing it with my wife, I decided that going to the police was not the best option. I saved a copy of the keylogger log files on a USB drive for evidence should I ever need it to defend myself. I then deleted the partitions of the HD, recreated them, and then formatted it. As for the guy himself, I was very tempted to kick his butt, but really just wanted his disgusting butt out of my life. I did confront him about what I had found and told him he needed to get some help. I told him I was keeping evidence of his actions, and if he ever came near my family again, a copy was going to be sent to the authorities and also his parents. A house guest at my parents' house stayed in my childhood bedroom. He was a drunk, and in the middle of the night I guess he decided he didn't want the fan on anymore. Instead of turning the fan off, he broke every fan blade off the ceiling fan and hid them under the dresser. TLDR. 50-year-old man destroyed ceiling fan, as switching it off was too difficult. I had some friends over after a night out at the bar. My buddy and his girlfriend were fighting, and my buddy left. His fairly large girlfriend went into the bathroom, and we noticed that she was in there for quite a while. I assumed she was on the phone or whatever. At one point I looked over towards the bathroom and noticed water flooding underneath the door. The girl comes rushing out of the bathroom, pants around her knees, saying I don't know what happened. She had somehow fallen into the toilet, busting the bottom half of the tank. Water was all over the bathroom floor. Needless to say, she was drunk and very unhelpful. We ended spending $200 for a new toilet, and she never once offered to pay us back. Good thing they broke up because I never want her at my house again. Started snooping through all my things. I don't mind if people look at or touch things out in the open, but I think it's a bit rude to open drawers and just look through everything. Cousins came over to my house for a family BBQ. One of them raided my room while I was out surfing. My parents did not let me lock my room, so it was open game for the family. Cousin took my cell phone, wallet and some video games of mine. Also decided it would be okay to leave his herb remnants in my room. When I get home, my brother tells me who was in my room and I tell my mom about the missing stuff in the baggie of stems I found. I get grounded by her for calling her nephew a thief and a lecture about how I don't know how hard they, my cousins, have it. She also claims that the weed was mine and I was just scared that one of the family members found it. She says I am just shifting blame onto someone else. Quick for your information, I had a job at the time and paid for all that stuff he stole, and my weed was safely stashed in the tube I used for my keys when surfing. Week goes by and my uncle calls and tells me he found some of my stuff in his son's room. He apologizes for his son and tells my mom, but my mom still sides with my cousin. This leads to a long time of random drug testing by my mom. Oh, and I never got my stuff back. This happened a while back when I was in high school. So late 90s. I'm over it now. Actually, I am glad it happened. Incidents like that are what gave me incentive to get out of my house before everything went downhill. In regards to closure of this story and my mom, the cousin who took my stuff is long gone and missing. Kind of sad actually. Last I heard was that he moved out to Utah and disappeared. My mom and I no longer talk. I had my son too. 2 years ago and my mom was unable to act appropriately around he and my wife. She liked to make xenophobic jokes, my wife's race being the butt of the joke, which in turn makes my son the subject of the joke. That amongst other things led to falling out. During my first summer in college, I lived at home. My parents have a beautiful, massive, 3,600 square feet house that has a very open floor plan. They leave me in charge of pet sitting our dozens of animals for a week. I decide to have some co-workers over for beer pong and hot tubbing. One of my rather annoying co-workers finds out and invites herself. She shows up and proceeds to drink more than anyone her size should ever drink. By 9 PM, she is beyond wasted and proceeds to vomit. She somehow manages to walk from my living room to the guest room, past 3 bathrooms and the kitchen sink, while vomiting the entire way. There was puke on the couch, carpet, walls, stairwell, and every piece of furniture between the living room and guest room. Once she stumbles into there, she proceeds to strip naked and throw her vomit-soaked clothing onto the bed. She then begins to rummage through my closet and finds herself something to wear, despite me begging her to go shower and let me bring her clothes. Obviously she spends the night, and the next morning, as I am scrubbing the remnants of her vomit off of every surface in my house, she asks me, "What are you going to make me for breakfast? I'm too hungover to drive right now." She didn't even attempt to help clean up her puke. What I did to this girl, I am ashamed to admit that I didn't really say do anything. But the next day at work, everyone knew about her transgression, and she was no longer able to invite herself to parties, and was henceforth known as Barfy. Sorry I am such a spineless fool, guys. It's actually brunch right now, so I'm making eggs Bene Jethafric out of me house. Not a guest of my own, but a former roommate's girlfriend would come over and destroy our kitchen trying to create new dishes. She would leave rice burned into pots, wash cast iron pans, and I mean wash them, in addition to leaving nasty protein drink cups sitting in the sink, and hardly helping to put anything away. So glad I live by myself now and don't have to deal with other people's guests. Wash cast iron pans, and I mean wash them. No jury in the world would convict you for killing them. The person who washed your pants, you would get away with murder. So I live in a co-op and we sometimes host couch surfers or friends of friends, and usually it goes over great. Positive memories include me taking 4 Austrian girls to Six Flags and having one of the most fun days of my life, and otherwise meeting interesting and awesome people. The worst thing people have done though, is once we had a couple come and stay with us, and had said they would only stay for 2 or 3 days. They came in a van, like an actual hippie burner van that they lived in, parked in our tiny parking driveway, and brought an untrained puppy that they didn't tell any of us about. The puppy peed on everything and fought with our well-behaved, well-trained, usually chill dog, and harassed our cats viciously. We already had pets. They should have told us they were bringing a dang dog, because we had 2 cats and a dog of our own at the time, and the stupid puppy could have been dangerous to them. Now we have 3 cats and the dog moved to Portland with his owner. Don't want anyone to think my use of past tense meant anything bad happened to any of our pets. Then, every time the puppy destroyed something, peed on something or harassed another pet, I'd ask its owners to do something about it and they would flip out on me. He's just a little puppy, how could we yell at him, and would get super defensive while refusing to take responsibility at all for the fact that their animal was a menace. Furthermore, they ended up staying 2 weeks with their huge stupid van in our yard. They were friends of another housemate, so she kept begging us to let them stay. And then when the rest of the house got so fed up with their entitled ways and their dang dog, they acted like we were the bad guys for making them leave, and that if you guys are a co-op house it's not very in the spirit to force travelers to leave. I hate that crap. Just because we are a co-op doesn't mean we're a haven for hippie freeloaders. It's a home we keep clean and live in. Most of us have normal jobs and normal lives, we just prefer the reduced cost and increased companionship of a large house full of people. Freaking hippies, man. So I'm a huge fan of It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia. A couple years ago FX made an official army jacket like Charlie's in the show, and as birthday present from my now dead mother, she bought it for me. I waited 2 weeks for the thing to arrive, opened it up and fell in love. It was perfect, down to the patches on the front to the freaking stitching and shade of green on the jacket. Come to find it was just a tiny bit too big for me, but too small to exchange for a smaller size. Mom offers to pay to have it altered so it'll fit me like a glove. We fold it up and put it right on her dresser in plain sight to take to a tailor next week. We had to wait, because some uncle I'd never met was driving in from Wisconsin to visit for the weekend. All 3 bedrooms were taken up, so my mom offered hers up for him to stay in for the night. Everything's cool, right? Mom and grandma swear up and down he's a great guy and I'll love meeting him. He was okay, kind of full of himself, and I soon wandered back to my bedroom to read and play some games by myself. Morning comes, uncle whoever the frick leaves before I get up. Mum goes shopping, and I chill out in her room to watch TV for a while. But something is missing. My $80 jacket, that I love so dang much and couldn't wait to be able to wear, was gone. I tore the whole fricking house apart searching for it and it was fricking gone. I know that butthole stole it because it sat in that spot on the dresser for 2 fricking days before he got here, and the day he left it wasn't there. My grandmother insists he wouldn't have done it. My mother did too. And now I can't even buy another one because they don't make them anymore. So whatever your name was, guy from Wisconsin, I hope you open a box of Hornets one day. I only got to wear that thing for 5 fricking minutes and you stole a girl's 16th birthday present. I fricking hate that guy. Just last year I let a couple live with me when they first moved to La to get settled in, and then we were all planning on finding a bigger apartment with them later. Her dad was best friends with my late father, so even though we didn't know her personally we assumed the best. The first thing they did was bring a golden retriever and a cat to my apartment that does not allow pets and did not tell me. After countless times of them not listening to me and us almost getting evicted, they finally listened but then continued to bring the dog and cat back. It was exhausting. They didn't pay rent or utilities and still owe me so much money. The girl was completely insane. She was the moodiest person I have ever met. She got drunk one night and threw her cat against the ceiling and threw my friend in a closet. Then took all my dishes and started smashing them. WTF. The final month was coming up on our lease, and by this point my other roommate was overwhelmed and moved out. So the new guests were going to split rent with me. The day before rent was due they told me they were moving out and not giving me any money for rent. I could not afford $2,500 rent by myself, so within a night I was homeless. I had to move out within the night into my best friend's apartment. When they moved out they took a bunch of my stuff, broke the window and dishes, and never helped clean the place at all. I was so lucky my landlord let me out of the lease. Never had I met such terrible people before in my life. I would have taken them to small claims court. You could have gotten that money back. A friend of ours was visiting with her child. This was not really a child, but a 8-year-old C who after 5 minutes made it obvious the lack of discipline she grew up with. My daughter and said Hellion were playing in her room. The adult stepped outside to discuss something for less than 3-4 minutes. We returned when we hear it squawk to find her holding my dove. The little crap opened the cage and grabbed her to pet her. Did you know you can't squeeze a bird? It died from internal injuries less than 2 hours later. My daughter was heartbroken. I'm heartbroken. Douche kid. A mutual friend used to cause a few issues wherever he went. The first time he did anything bad at my house was after a university pub crawl about a month after I met him. We stumbled home and sat on the deck having one last beer. It was about 3 AM and he gets up and goes inside and I say, "Where you going?" "Dude, I'm going to have a wank." "Ah, okay, right." No one seems surprised at this revelation and someone says, "Yeah, he likes to jerk off after a good drinking session." I found this fact more than a little disturbing. No more than 5 minutes passes and he comes out with a grin on his face. The other guys start warily edging away from him like they know something is up. I follow their lead and sure enough he slurs out, "Who wants to see my Spider-Man impersonation?" He holds up his hand and it is covered in semen. It looks like he's jammed his hand into a massive jar of glue. He then opens his fingers and sure enough, ropey strands of ejaculate do their best impression of Spider-Man's web. He then chased us around the house for a bit singing the Spider-Man theme tune, all the while flinging web at unsuspecting victims. I ran from the house screaming like a 12-year-old girl and wouldn't come back until someone reassured me that he'd passed out in the garden bed. A few weeks later we are back at my house and it is the morning after a big night, so the deviant goes for his ritualistic wank. Just takes himself off into a bedroom, locks the door and gets down to business. He's in there for only about 3 minutes and then trudges back out, sits down and starts watching TV. The guys who live at the house say, "Dude, how about you frick off home?" And he replies, "Gotta wait for my sock to dry." He'd had a wank, couldn't find anything to wipe up with so he used his sock. We all look out the window and the clothesline is empty except for one solitary CM soaked sock slowly spinning around in the wind. Enough was enough. We told him to get out, take his CM rag and go home. He reluctantly trudged outside and got his sock off the line, put it on his foot and squelched off home. Squelch, squelch, squelch. Off he went. Great aunt stayed to pet sit, cooked and ate the family rabbit in a stew. At least you found out before you asked her to babysit. I had a sleepover for my 10th birthday. I invited all 11 girls from my class. All 11 showed up, which was unexpected. It was a very small house with 4 people living there. So, as you can imagine, it was extremely cramped. Not the best idea for a party. Anyways, one of the attendees was a girl, I'll call her Amanda, who I only invited because I knew she didn't have any friends. I soon found out why when she locked my stepsister out of my room, claiming only big kids were allowed. My stepsister was 6 at the time, broke my wooden bed frame by intentionally falling backwards onto it, threw herself onto my stepdad's back and tried to force him to carry her around. She was pretty overweight so this definitely wasn't comfortable. Came to the party when she had ringworm. That's actually more her guardian's faults than hers. That's all I can think of, though I'm sure there were more incidents. I actually always felt very bad for her because her mother was very violently murdered when Amanda was a baby. The case was and still is very infamous where I live. I'm pretty sure most of her behavior at the party, as well as everywhere else, she pretty much always acted out, was because she wasn't getting enough attention at home due to her mom's death. That or her lack of friends. I dunno. Haven't heard from her since elementary school, so I hope she's okay. This is really saddening in a way. I think everyone has met their own Amanda. One of my buddy's friends tried to debauch a girl in my bedroom, so I went up to him and asked him politely to leave, across the face 2 or 3 times. He must have been drinking because he couldn't walk very well. The clumsy guy fell down the steps to my driveway. I decided in his lesser state of mind I would be responsible to drive him home. But since I didn't know where that was, I decided this dark field in the middle of nowhere out of town was as good a place as any. He was so drunk he forgot his cell phone in my car. Broke the air conditioner. Then broke the industrial size fan. Then the mini fan. Left in the early hours of the morning, with ramen noodles all over the place and the front and back doors wide open. Stole my Twix chocolate from the fridge and left the wrapper in the lawn. I hate family. Had fricked my girlfriend. Story time. In high school I had what was supposed to be a small gathering at my house while my parents were gone. But there had been a party for someone's birthday and everyone from the birthday dinner found their way to my house. I was a little on edge because quite a few of the people coming were people I did not like at all. One of these people was Joey, an annoying jock who thought he was better than everyone. Well, once everyone gets there, I lay out some ground rules: no one going in my parents' bedroom or my bedroom. If you want to have some special no clothes time with a buddy, go to the guest bedroom. Please use the office bathroom or bathroom near the kitchen and put the seat down. Try to be clean, etc. But let's all have a great time. Literally 5 minutes later I go in the bathroom by my bedroom and the seat is up and there is pee everywhere. The party had just started and there was already a little lagoon of urine in and around my toilet. How does this even happen so quickly? I stormed back in the kitchen, stood on the counter, and politely asked, "WHO the frick pee all over my toilet," and left the seat up. Found out which kid did it. Surprise surprise. It was Jockey Shad Joey. Told him he could clean it up and stay, or leave the party in GTFO. I got out the Windex and made him clean it while everyone watched. This kid I did not like literally scrubbed my toilet on his hands and knees in front of a bunch of people just to hang out and drink the cheap Bud Light I had in my fridge. It was so satisfying. TLDR. Joey, I still hate you and your complete disregard for other people's things. Also, at school one day Joey kicked an entire bottle of red Powerade that was full and had no cap on it, getting sticky red liquid all over a classroom. He then refused to clean it up because it wasn't his Powerade that he had kicked. I believe I gave him Lysol and Windex. I just wanted him to clean more. I'd say this was the perfect punishment, and must have felt so good. I once had an acquaintance of my wife break not 1, but 2 glasses in a matter of 10 minutes. B got a plastic cup after that. My friend drunkenly broke 2 glasses at my house. Even before I could say anything, he runs out the door, comes back 5 minutes later with a whole box of glasses that he had gotten from his trunk. He had gotten married a few months earlier and he had received lots of kitchen items. My buddy and I were celebrating my birthday and we put down about a 1/5 of 80 proof whiskey between the 2 of us. I woke up a few hours after we'd passed out to find him squatting in the middle of the living room taking a giant, spraying drunk crap all over our brand new hardwood floor. And of course my top comment ever is about my buddy crapping on my floor. Anyway, to follow up, I walked in on him in the middle of the process and, since I was still drunk, turned around and went right back to bed. The next morning I woke up and it was gone. Apparently, at some point later in the night my wife, now ex-wife, but for different reasons, came out, found the giant disaster of a mess, woke up my drunk friend who was sleeping on the couch, and made him clean the entire floor. He threw up once during the process and just kept on cleaning. To this day he doesn't remember any of it. Hey, at least it wasn't carpet. Seriously though, that's disgusting. Although not technically a guest, my 5-year-old cousin started to take a dump in our downstairs toilet and somehow got it all over the toilet seat and floor. This is bad enough, but then mid-crap he decided to run upstairs, crapping as he went, and defecate in the upstairs bathroom too. We had house guests at the time who witnessed the whole thing. My brother had a party one night while me and my mom were both gone. I came home around 7 AM the following morning to find a random naked girl and condom wrappers in my bed. He let one of his buddies where me and my daughter sleep. Needless to say I flipped the frick out. His friends, 20 years olds, are still afraid of me, huh? Lit a dang cigarette at my kitchen table. We weren't eating as much as we were playing cards, spades, and drinking. My wife's co-worker's husband decided he was just going light a cigarette in a smoke-free home. I asked him to put it out and he told me that it's not bothering anyone, so what's the big deal? I couldn't kick that butthole out of my house fast enough. What peed me off more was my wife's co-worker comes to work the next day and says that he doesn't smoke in the house at home and wanted to know when they could come over and try again. What the frick? Stopped up the toilet with crap. Not just any crap. It was green and full of leaves. That's what you get for inviting a brontosaurus around. Got up, walked over to my stereo, stopped the music and ejected the CDs to put something different. Another friend would get up and adjust the tone on the receiver and graphic equalizer. Both of these guys fancied themselves audiophiles and believed that gave them tacit permission to futz with my stereo without asking first. My friends tune every guitar in my house. I like to leave some cheap guitars lying around so I can just pick them up and play them whenever the mood strikes. Everyone thinks they can tune by ear. Almost no one can. Stop freaking tuning my guitars. Borrowed my Game Boy and deleted my Pokemon save game. I was nearly at the Elite Four. Once my husband and I were staying at my mom's friend's house near Christmas. She used to keep stuff in her oven since she didn't cook and my husband turned it on to bake a pizza. My 2-year-old also broke a tree ornament. We were never invited back. I went out of town for the weekend, so I'll let a relative stay there in exchange for giving our cat a pill. Saves us from having to hire a pet sitter. I had left detailed instructions and there was a container with 9 or 10 days worth of pills. When my wife and I got back the last afternoon, we decided to go to dinner with the relative before they left. I went to feed and medicate the cat but there were no pills. When I asked, he said he had crushed them all up and put them in the cat's food. I said, didn't you even read my instructions? He said, sure, it said to give the cat the pills in the container. Yeah, but not all of them. Thank God the cat was fine, but we still give him crap. I let a group of friends stay at my apartment after a night of heavy drinking. I awoke to a figure standing by my clothes hamper and relieving himself into it. It turned out to be the head bartender of a high-end local steakhouse. In return, I waltzed and during dinner and sat at the bar ordered a 22-ounce dry-aged porterhouse medium rare with all the fixings and a bottle of Mondavi Cabernet Reserve. Took up space of about 2 hours and then shook his hand and left. I think that more than makes up for my clothes and furniture. One of my roommates was terrible and had super shady people over all the time. Once, someone peed all over my bathroom. I'm talking over the floor, in the shower, on the toilet, in the sink, and the mirror. I never knew someone could pee that much. Another, potential roommate, actually, had passed every one of my must-haves, until he started telling me that he didn't mind gay people, but didn't approve of a man fricking another man, right as my gay male roommate was walking up the stairs. Needless to say, he was not invited back. Oh come on, you just didn't let him finish. He was going to say, I don't approve of men fricking unless they have Chumbawamba playing in the background, which as we all know is a perfectly reasonable statement. I once had a guest who got really drunk, attacked a girl half his size and tried to strangle her, trashed a bunch of furniture, threw up all over the floor and smeared it all over the walls, then ran away. I bitched at him a dozen times about leaving his torrents up 24/7 and eventually told him he's got to stop torrenting altogether because it's getting ridiculous. A few months later I get notifications from my ICE that they've been subpoenaed for my information, and shortly after I'm involved in a civil case against myself for torrenting and sharing pee. Almost $2,000 in lawyer's fees later and I'm dropped off the lawsuit altogether, but it was a tense month or two there. Parents of Reddit, what is the creepiest thing a friend of your kid has done at your house? 11-year-old kid comes to my house. Friend of my daughter's. She goes into the bathroom, takes a crap and then calls out for assistance. Apparently her parents still wipe her butt. Sorry kid, this is not a service I offer. Yeah, unless she's disabled. You're on your own kid. Some neighbor's kid started pouring rubbing alcohol into our aquarium. Good thing we caught him early. I saw a grown butt man pouring vodka into his own aquarium. It was at a house party and I thought there wasn't any fish as he was jokingly asking if they would get drunk too and party with us. Lo and behold, half an hour later he was devastated. Not a parent, but once at a sleepover when I was about 12 my dad ordered pizza and one of the girls kept stepping on a slice and using it as a foot massager. My dad is still perplexed by this even over a decade later. Whoa, that's genuinely bizarre. I would love to know why she was doing that. I can't even think of the slightest explanation. We had friends at church who were very nice, but somehow ended up with deeply disturbed children. I walked in on their son masturbating with half of the peanut butter sandwich I had just made him. Wow, he sounds like a total nutter. Tried to kill my baby by smashing his head between the couch and coffee table. I told the mother. Next night she says, yeah, he tried to do it to the dog. I think we may have a problem. Oh yeah, that's where we should draw the line. Christ. Ugh, I have a 12-year-old and 7-month-old baby. Some of the creeps my 12 years old brings home makes this story eerily relatable. So glad baby was okay, but seriously WTF. For my daughter's birthday, which is in April, I typically invited her whole class to her birthday party. Each year the party was usually a cookout and I would get a kiddie pool set up and we always had a swing set and trampoline as well as yard games and toys. The kids would come over typically around 1 or 2 p.m. and stay a couple hours, eat, have some cake, play games, open presents and then leave. One year, when she was 9, a girl from her class was dropped off like all the rest and her mom said to have her call when the party was over and someone would pick her up. This particular year it happened to be spring break that week, so there was no school. The party ended. We called the various parents to pick up their kids and this particular child. We had to leave voice messages. Hours passed. All the children save that one had long since left. We continued to call and leave messages that all went unheeded. Night fell, so we loaned her some PJs and it turned into a sleepover. Now, we are white and lived in the country. This particular child was black and apparently had recently moved into the area from a city. She didn't know us, had never met us, and had only known my daughter as a classmate for maybe a month. It didn't matter to me that she was black. It just seemed to me like that if I was a child left behind in some strange place with people I didn't know, that being a different race would only enhance the scariness. Nope, not this child. She was happy as a lark. Day 2 morphed into day 3. We continued on life, now with an extra child. We continued to leave messages on the only contact number we had. We went shopping, out to eat, carried on with our lives. The girl said she didn't know people live like this, out in the country. By day 5, we had debated on calling the police and reporting her as abandoned. We decided to try to find her house. She knew approximately where she lived, so we went and drove around and around the neighborhood until she recognized her house. An older brother was there and he let her in and didn't really say much of anything. The next day, her mom rolls up in the yard with the girl and 3 of her younger siblings. We had apparently forgotten her swimsuit when we took her home. The mom asked if she could leave the kids there while she ran a quick errand. I told her that unfortunately, we were getting ready to leave ourselves and I was sorry. She got mad and yelled, took off in a huff. Truthfully, I was afraid she was going to leave all the kids and just not come back. It was really weird how the girl just seemed to accept that no one was coming to get her. All the other kids I know would have been crying and hysterical wanting to go home. The girl finished out the school year and didn't come back in the fall. I guess they moved away. That's one of the more fricked up ones. I would have called the police and CPS on day 3. Not to do with me, but my dad told me when he was a kid his neighbors, also kids, broke into his house when they were out and sacked the place, including cutting their pet goldfish in half. My dad's parents found out and the neighbors' parents made the kids clean up the house. I hope that wasn't the extent of their punishment. Breaking, entering, and vandalizing is serious. I'm the weird kid in this story. There was this kid I used to hang out with all the time. I used to go over to his house and we played video games for hours straight. This one time, me and another friend went over to his house to ask him if he wanted to come play with us. They weren't at home, but they had their cleaning lady in their house working. Now I can't remember if it is the lady who invited us in, or if we invited ourselves in given our familiarity with the place, but one way or another we went inside and helped ourselves with his video games. completely unaware of the weirdness of the situation that we're in. The lady even brought us snacks. They eventually came back to find 2 kids in their living room playing video games. His mom got upset with the lady, I think, but I do remember her calmly explaining us that it was not okay and we shouldn't be in their home again unless they are home. I really wasn't the brightest kid. No parent, but as a kid I'd have this friend that would kill small animals, try and shove my little sister down the stairs, and do all sort of twisted stuff. Needless to say, he ended up in jail for robbing a place, I think. Guy wasn't fully there, didn't come from a broken home or anything either. His parents were absolutely lovely, still talk to his parents to this day, him, not so much. I grew up on a small dead-end street and we were the only ones with a pool, so we spent a lot of our summers in our pool. There was this one neighbor who weirded us all out. He was a hardcore druggie and we found him passed out drunk in his pickup a lot. Well, his niece and nephew came to live with him because their mom died, so they started swimming with us too. The girl was older than most of us and also larger. A few times she decided it would be funny to push a few of us underwater and hold us there, especially me since I was the smallest and youngest. We stopped letting them come over after that. Not a parent. This happened to me as a kid. I was sleeping over in a friend's house, Andrew, with another friend, Armin. So we were playing video games and crap till late. Andrew sleeps in its own room as it's his house and my other friend and I get to share a room with a big bed. We were like 14, so it felt a little weird as straight teens. We are there just awake talking and we begin to hear some weird noises, like some white noise and some faded voices and then white noise and then a little music, louder and lower and louder again. We rise and go to face the music and in the living room there he is, our friend just wearing underwear, placed on his knees playing with the buttons of the radio at 3 AM completely asleep. We ask him, "What you doing, man?" "Yeah, right." Then he turns and screams, "I am creating magic." We thought he was possessed or something and we went straight to their parents' room and they told us he sometimes sleepwalks. When we come back to him he is just sleeping in the floor and they walked him back to bed. This is why you'll never become more than a muggle. Not a parent, but this happened when I was about 11 or 12. I was sleeping over at a friend's house, let's call him Joe, and there was another friend staying over, Tom. Joe and I were upstairs in his room playing Xbox at like 10 PM. Went down to the kitchen to get a glass of water and see Tom sitting on a couch in the dark staring blankly at nothing. I was like, "UHH, what are you up to, man?" And he just straight up looks me in the eye and goes, "I'm talking to my grandma." This dude's grandmother died when he was like 4 or something. Needless to say, I noped the frick out of there. Never saw that kid again. Dang, this is pretty intense. I wonder if he may have been sleepwalking to some extent and just dreaming about his grandma. Spooky either way. I haven't had any real creepy incidents as a parent yet, apart from the odd random friend exploring the house and finding their way in our bedroom, but I am planning a camp out sleepover for my 11 years old soon, so I might have a good story then. In the meantime, when I was a kid, this strange family moved in a couple doors up from us and had a daughter around my age. She didn't attend school with me and was clearly intellectually challenged. She decided to be my friend, coming over all the time even if no one was home. She was obsessed with my dog, a young boxer pup, and would play with her whether anyone was home or not. She would come into the house uninvited and find my mum on the toilet and casually chat with her. Poor girl had no social etiquette or anything. I truly felt sorry for her and would share my homework with her, but she couldn't read or write. We were probably 10 or 11 ourselves. Anyway, after about 6 months my mum was fed up with this girl coming and going and making herself at home. So mum approached her parents and tried to find out what the deal was. Mum could see an abused child a mile away and decided to call CPS. They were investigated and the girl was taken into emergency foster care. Mum couldn't take her in due to the proximity of her parents. Turns out they had been prostituting their daughter out to pay for their alcohol and she hadn't been in school since year 2. It was so horrific. We found out shortly after their landlord was evicting them for no rent payment. We received a death threat in our letterbox for my puppy, literally stating that since we took her daughter they were going to take something of ours. Police had to evict them, and 1 week after that, my little pup Jeddah went missing. Small town and the only red boxer, but she never came home. I'll never forgive them, but I hope their daughter got a decent life far, far away from those monsters. Not my story. but of friends. One time when she was in 2nd grade, my friend had another friend over at her house. At one point, they were just sitting on a couch when all of a sudden, the other kid started choking my friend on the floor. She barely had enough time to call her mom. The friend wasn't allowed at her house anymore. Not a parent, but I recall this very vividly. I was friends with this kid at my school whose parents didn't really care for him. So when he all but invited himself over one weekend, his parents dropped him off with food on the street corner and just kinda left. Mind you, I have no sidewalk on my street. It's just ditches and then a very heavily trafficked road. So he walked along the side of the road to my house and entirely expected to then stay for most of the day. When my parents called his parents to come get him, they made some excuse about how he'd said he'd be staying the night, which I'd never agreed to, and we forced them to come pick him up. When everything was said and done, it wound up being his 16-year-old brother who came to get him, who I later learned couldn't legally drive at the time. Maybe not creepy, but honestly a very weird and disturbing situation to find myself in the middle of. Oh, that's really sad for the kid. Super weird for you for sure, but also sad. Thought it was creepy at first, but this kid, who was the first friend I made in my new school, always came over to my house. After school he was there. Weekends he was there the first thing in the morning. Holidays and summer he basically lived with us. He never wanted me to go to his house. Found out his mom was an alcoholic and beat him. His dad died in a car accident back when he was 10 years old, so I told my mom this and she never turned him away, even times when I wasn't there. He eventually lived with us from 8th grade until junior year in HS, when his uncle got out the military and took him in. Wholesome. Thanks for sharing. A friend of my older sister spent the afternoon at our place and tried to drown me in the bathtub when I was a baby. My mum walked in and stopped him. She wasn't very pleased. Mum was telling me of a story from when I was 6 when my friend killed a lizard in front of everyone and laughed. A girl came over to my house and did come super psychopath I want your life crap. This girl I knew from 1st grade came over for a sleepover. We must have fought over something, because I went up to my room because I got so mad at her. I forget why. It must have been big though, because I'm not one to march out on a guest. Anyway, while I'm upstairs crying, I see in the mesh pocket of her away bag a bright pink Easter egg with some fur stinking out of it, and I realize I hear faint squeaking. I go over, pick up the egg, and it's warm and shaking. I open it and my pet mouse like explodes out of there. I'm absolutely horrified. I see in the bag all of my favorite toys and some of my clothes. She took them and squirreled them away in her clothes to try to hide them. I go downstairs with the Easter egg, ready to absolutely raise heck with my evidence, only to see my mom in the kitchen quite shaken already. There she is, looking down at my pet guinea pig in its cage, nose bloody, right front paw torn off, and obviously dead. This kid was sitting on the couch watching TV acting like she had no idea what happened. In less than 1 hour this kid brutally murdered my pet, tried to take another one for later, and planned to take my favorite toys and even some of my clothes. My mom was like nope. Sent me to a friend's house and drove that kid home because she wasn't waiting for her parents to come get her. When my mom talked to her about it while in the car, she said the girl said I just wanted to be like her. Never saw that kid again. Hope she's safely locked away somewhere. Okay, that is creepy as heck and slightly traumatizing. Like holy crap. Not a parent but a friend of mine did something pretty weird. We were 11 or 12, and my family went on vacation for 2 weeks. When we returned home we walked into our house but no one turned on the lights in my family room for like 20 minutes. I turned them on and my friend was just staring at our television, which was off, not saying a word. Didn't respond to my first few attempts to head his attention until he randomly snapped back into it. Creepy crap walking into your house after a vacation and turn on a light and see a kid who's zoned out. He has some mental problems and was heavily medicated as a kid. Came over to hang out often and knew we kept our side door unlocked. Needless to say we established some more rigid boundaries after. Yo, what the frick. One kid at my place used to try and kiss my dog's butt. Dog's name is Vince McMahon.
When I was about 12 years old, I was at a friend's house building things with Lego. My friend goes to the bathroom and about 5-10 minutes later I hear him yell down, "Mom, I need a wipe." Since I was a curious kid, I followed his mother when she then proceeded to open the bathroom and wipe a 13-year-old son's butt for him. I thought it was weird even then. Sorry kid, this is not a service I offer. I had a work friend bring her kid over to play with mine. He was 8, I have a boy who was 7 and a girl who was almost 5 at the time. He told her she was going to have a baby and had her lay down and take off her pants and panties. My son knew this was wrong and came to tell me before anything else happened. My friend was super embarrassed and we actually didn't talk much for a few months because we were both uncomfortable with it. We tried to get together in a public place a couple of times since then, but it just wasn't the same anymore. I had already quit working with her before the incident, but I'm still kind of sad at losing my friend. Obligatory, not a parent, but there was this kid that I was friends with for basically all of elementary school and his mom let him do anything. He watched R-rated movies when he couldn't have been older than 7, never brushed his teeth, had his own computer, etc. So you can see how he was more knowledgeable than me in the freaking department. Well, anyways, one day me and him were at my mom's house alone and he dropped his pants and tried to make me suck him off. Since I guess he thought I would just go along with it, well, I didn't understand the physical implications of that at the time, but I knew it was gross, so I pulled his pants up and told him how gross it was and went back to playing Pokemon. Obligatory, I'm not a parent, but this is something me and my parents talk about to this day. I had a slumber party in 1st grade and invited probably 8-10 girls. Can't remember how or why, but we all ended up in the bathroom. One of the girls has to use the bathroom, so we all walk out, except one girl. She stood there and crap on my bathroom wall, right in front of the other chick. Her excuse? The other girl was on the toilet and she couldn't hold it. Girl was a frickin' weirdo to begin with. She ended up being my roommate last year and was just as fricking strange and 10 times more annoying. On behalf of everyone, please tell us some roommate stories. Grades 1-3. I was friends with a girl who had issues, adopted from an abusive home before we met. She would randomly decide to just leave our playdates to walk herself home, which was not possible because she lived a good 20-minute drive away, some of that highway. My mom describes her as nice, but kind of eerie sometimes. When I was a kid, I had one of those soul friends who was more of a friend of my video games. You know the deal, coming over constantly to play single player games, demanding me to give him food and all that jazz. One day he came over when I was away somewhere. No one answered the door, but he noticed that the window to my room was open, so the sucker climbed in, turned on my PC and tried to play something, but he heard my mom coming out of the shower, so he bolted. Told me the next day at school and I told everyone including my parents. Then school and his parents got involved and Jay got in a ton of crap for that. Hated me ever since. Not a parent, rather, I was the kid in this story. My mum got engaged to this rich guy whose daughter was a couple of years younger than me. Growing up, she had practically every animal she'd ever asked her dad to buy for her, but over the years, once they eventually died, she buried them in a corner of their backyard. One day she showed me the little rocks she had put on top of their graves as makeshift tombstones. I suggested that we dig up the bodies so we could see what they looked like. She said no and afterwards ended up coincidentally staying at a friend's place every following weekend that I was due to stay at her dad's place. Sorry, Ash. I was 4 years old and my first cousin tried to get me to give him a BJ several times. I didn't like the idea because that's where P comes from, so I told my parents. He was around 9 at the time. Her mother, my aunt, dismissed it by, well, he must have learned it in school, don't pay attention to it. A different incident came between our families and I haven't talked to them in over a decade. Can't say I am devastated. Went into the kitchen and then ran into the bathroom. He comes out half an hour later and I ask if he's okay. He says sure and gets back to playing video games. I went into the bathroom later that day and found a cucumber caked in crap sitting in the trash can. It smelt bad and had specks of blood. Not the parent, but this was my brother's friend. Flashback to the mid-2000s, where LAN parties were all the rage. All-nighters, sugary drinks, and junk food. One kid didn't know his limits, and had a little too much to eat, and a little too much to drink.
He ended up throwing up. Not the end of the world, but he didn't tell anyone. Since there were 2 bathrooms nearby, nobody noticed this one was out of order either. So, the kid didn't just throw up in the toilet, but the wood floors, the walls, the ceiling, the counters. That was the absolutely most disgusting thing I have ever seen or smelled. We literally had to remove all the wood from that room, floor, trim, cabinets, etc. All of it ruined. We ended up just putting tile in there, since we couldn't find a way to make the new wood match the rest. This kid ended up costing over $10,000 in damages, cleanup, deconstruction, rebuilding the cabinets to match the rest of the house, and reconstruction, with one glorious vomit session. Jesus Christ. It wasn't at my house, but at the neighbors. My parents were somewhere, so my sister and I were supposed to spend the day and have dinner at the neighbor's house. They had a mentally disabled daughter that they refused to admit had any problems at all, so she was basically a holy terror to be around. Dinner time came and I had a big plate of spaghetti in front of me, and the daughter walks over to me and grabs a fistful of spaghetti off my plate and stuffs it in her mouth. The thing was, this girl was disgustingly filthy. She drooled constantly, and her parents didn't seem to think she needed washing, so her face and mouth were perpetually crusted with dried stuff, and her hands were always in her mouth. So no freaking way was I eating that plate of fist noodles. She hadn't even looked at her own plate of food, so I just stood up and moved to her spot at the table and prepared to eat. Now the mother starts yelling at me to get back to your own seat, and I said, Jamie, put her hands in my food, I'm not eating it, and she says she doesn't have cooties. Now eat your dinner. I sat there staring at the plate, and just thinking about eating it was making me gag. When they started pressuring me to eat it again, I got up, ran back to my house, and locked the door. Stayed there until my parents came home. So when my parents got home, they were told a completely different story. That I was throwing food and running around the table, wouldn't sit down. After I told them my version, it was clear that things made more sense since they knew the daughter had problems that the parents wouldn't acknowledge. We live in a middle-class neighborhood next to a park. On the other side of the park is a poor neighborhood with low-income apartments, run-down houses, and a trailer park. Whatever. I grew up poor. I don't judge people based on their wealth, and it meant my house was cheaper. My son made a friend that lived in the low-income apartments. At first the kid seemed nice enough. He was polite, and that is always a big bonus point with parents. One day both boys were off playing at the park when I got a knock at my front door. It was a friend. I asked him where my son was, and the kid said, "Oh, he's coming." We were racing and I got ahead of him. No big deal. I let the kid in and he went back to my son's room. After a while I realized my son still wasn't home. The other kid was in my son's room happily playing with Lego. I was weirded out but not sure what to do. A little while later my son came home and blew up. He did not want this kid, or anyone else for that matter, in his room when he wasn't home. I pulled my son aside, apologized, explained what happened, and promised it would never happen again. I told the kid that we were about to go somewhere and that he needed to go home. The kid asked if he could stay and play anyway. I told him no and shooed him out the door. The kid came by my house a few days later when my son was spending the night with his grandparents. He asked if he could borrow one of my son's Xbox controllers because he had a cousin spending the night but only one Xbox controller. My son wasn't there to say yes or no, so I let the kid borrow one of my own Xbox controllers. We parents have our own Xbox in the living room. I told the kid that I would need the Xbox controller back the next day. A few days later my husband had to go to the kid's house and get the controller back from the kid's mom. The kid had, apparently, planned to keep it. Then the kid started coming by our house when our son was off playing around the neighborhood. He'd ask if he could come in and play and we'd tell him that our son wasn't home. He'd ask if he could come in and play with our son's toys anyway. The answer was no, but the kid kept coming back and coming back, hoping to weasel his way into my son's room again. My son stopped being friends with him because he figured out that the kid didn't actually want to be friends with him. The kid just wanted to ride my son's ripstick and play with his toys. But the kid kept showing up to our house when our son wasn't here and asking to be let in to play with our son's toys. Even tried lying his way in a few more times. Finally, my husband got fed up and went and talked to the kid's mom again, and the kid quit coming to our house. Perhaps not creepy, and not entirely my kid's friend. My friend's kid. She was in a bind and didn't have anyone to keep her kids after school, so I told her they could come home with my son and hang out while she finished up her first day at a new job. First, her younger son, Q, is a bit on the spectrum, so his quirks in general. He hadn't been over before, but we had hung out many times, and he looked up to my son as a favorite friend, and the older son was good friends with my kid. We live in a crappy apartment in a very nice part of town, and Q acted as though he had never, ever been inside an apartment. Many times he expressed how little it was and how he couldn't believe that people in our neighborhood could have an apartment. Q also loves World War II, and told me many facts about generals. He was quite taken with Russia, and referred to it as Mother Russia while using a terrible fake Russian accent. I happen to do an amazing Russian accent, which he loved, so if I wanted him to do anything, I had to ask it in the Russian accent. I also have decorated my apartment a bit whimsically, with a ton of animals and gnomes and other things sort of around in interesting scenes. My niece was over once and counted my animal related things and came to the conclusion that 23 animals live in my living room, but similar paintings aren't. Q was distressed that they weren't named, so spent the afternoon naming most of them, but not cutesy pet names, which is why I now have a gold dinosaur named Brian and a porcelain rabbit named Kevin, along with a few other adult male named animals that I can't recall. Brian and Kevin get asked after regularly, though, and my son still occasionally remembers to call them by their name, even though this was over a year ago and Q has only been over again one time since then. This is actually kinda sweet. A kid took a crap on our stairs and tried to blame me. Not a parent, but when I was about 7 years old I went over to my friend's house and she told me I had to drink a ton of water, so I did. Later, she told me she had a fun idea and got out some plastic Walmart bags and said we should pee in them together. She was really secretive about the whole thing and I was pretty uncomfortable. Not too long after, she followed me into the bathroom at school and told me that if I didn't pee on her hands, she wouldn't be my friend anymore. I didn't want to do it, so I just accepted that I was going to lose a friend. I told my mom when I got home, and she seemed really concerned and called my friend's parents. I didn't understand why at the time and sort of shrugged it off as something really weird my friend did as a kid, since the girl in question grew up to be totally normal. However, a few months ago I was recalling the story when hanging out with my mother, and I found out that she had been physically shamed by her uncle and was making me do what her uncle made her do. I'm not a parent but know someone's kid who killed the neighbor's guinea pig and was playing with the lifeless body for like an hour. Like the cartoon Lenny, played to rough and fricked it up. The kid was 4 at the time. Frick, that reminds me of a little cousin of mine who put his kitten in the toilet, closed the lid and flushed the toilet over and over so it would stop meowing. It eventually drowned and he put in the trash can next to the toilet and went on to play video games. He was 6. Kid fricking scares me. The 5-yo twins from next door walked into my house without knocking or being invited and sat down in our living room and started playing with my kids' toys. I asked if they were okay, and one of them replied, yeah, our parents need some alone time so we need to be here for a while. About 15 minutes later, they both stood up at the same time and walked out the door without saying anything. Oh, the shining twins. My daughter had a friend come around when she was 7 or 8. This girl was pretty odd and obviously used to getting her own way, but the weirdest thing was one day when I was in the kitchen and they had been playing outside. I am renovating our house and there were no baseboards so you could see under the house. It looks creepy as an adult, but kids have vivid and wild imaginations. They come running in and she grabs a sharp knife from the kitchen drawer. I stop her and ask her what she's doing. My daughter says they are going to kill the monster under the house. I tell her to immediately put that knife back. But we need to kill the monster and then they both start to run out again. I very firmly tell her to put it back. Now, she does. We told her mother about it but she is not very good at the whole parenting thing. I shudder to think what could have happened. That sounds like the intent was harmless. Give them a butter knife and tell them it's just as effective but the monster won't see it coming. I'm not a parent but I have so many of these. Once, my mother took me to some kind of cookout celebrating a bar's anniversary that she frequented. There were a few other kids there and I quickly made friends with them. We were all super talkative and friendly with each other, save for the younger sister of one of the girls. The younger sister would stare at me and always stand a little off from the group and mumble to herself. Well, while we were playing something akin to Pictionary in the dirt, she decided to come up behind me and put me in a chokehold. I was panicking since I obviously couldn't breathe, and the group of kids had absolutely no idea what to do. After just a few moments, her parents quickly ran over and ripped her off of me. Bonus: my mother insisted the kid never choked me and she was just playing. Another time, I was the creepy kid. I was staying at a friend's house for the night for her birthday. Before we all laid down, we had scared each other with stories and creepy videos. I'm easily scared and kept imagining a monster under her bed, so I couldn't sleep. Instead, I kinda sat in the hallway and tried to fall asleep there. I guess her dad came home from work because he walked into the house, rounded a corner, and saw me there hunched over and unresponsive when he called out. He went into the bedroom her mom was staying in, but I felt embarrassed so I got up and went back into the room all the kids were in. Our door was cracked, so I overheard him walking back into the hallway and saying, "I swear there was a kid here." She was just sitting there and the mother replying, "Yeah, okay, go to bed." Bonus: he peeked into our room after that and saw everyone asleep. I closed my eyes when I saw him approach the door. The last one is just funny. Dad got bamboozled. When my niece was 3, we babysat her and her friend. Dog was barking. Friend stared at him and he stopped and slunk away. Wouldn't go in the same room as her the whole time. Never babysat that kid again. Parent of 2 girls. In preschool she had a few boyfriends who were about the same age as her who would come over quite often. One day I walked in on what I thought was this kid reading to her, but he had his dong out. I promptly yelled at him, asking what he thought he was doing, and he simply replied with, "I'm teaching her to read backwards." With your dong out? That's how I taught my wife to read backwards. Not a parent, but my dad told me a story about me. He was taking me to the park. I was playing with geese, and he got distracted talking to moms in the park. Then he heard a very loud goose scream, turned around and saw that I was choking the poor thing. I was 3 at the time. He had to grab me and leave the park to avoid freaked out and judging moms. Dong blocked your dad, LMAO. When I was a kid I used to have to hang out with my mom's co-worker's child. We couldn't afford a babysitter, so sometimes my mom would babysit us and sometimes the co-worker would. We were like maybe 9 or 10, but it was very apparent that this kid had no sense of what authority meant. His mom would give him anything he wanted. He basically controlled her like if she were a puppet, and he had the strings. The kid also loved to get very physical, and this was annoying because I was a small kid when I was little and very weak, so I stood almost no chance. The kid would push me, attempt to punch me, and quite literally attack me out of the blue, and since his mother had no control over him, I basically felt alone. He got really into WWE and started trying to perform all those moves on me, so he tried flipping me, and honestly it felt like I was always on the defensive. I ended up learning how to mentally manipulate him as he wasn't the brightest. This meant that I would constantly derail his thoughts by mentioning movies, games, or literally anything that would mentally stimulate him until I was out of harm. I actually got really good at this, and ended up being able to manipulate the mom into getting us McDonald's or Burger King by planting that seed into the kid's brain, which he would then yell at his mother until she followed his command. It honestly taught me at a young age that people can indeed be manipulated, and that sometimes you don't need to be stronger than someone to defuse a situation. Apparently the mom also wasn't the brightest. Not a parent, but a teenage male cousin's friend drilled a hole into the bathroom wall from his bedroom for presumably peeping. Said little cousin lived with his grandmother. Sigh. Yo, what the frick? My daughter was about 8 when she had a friend sleep over. They were asleep, supposedly, when we looked up and the girl was just standing there staring at us. We were in our room with the door open so we could hear. Creepy. My nephew actually does this sometimes, and if you wake him up from it he freaks out for hours. It has something to do with him having autism. Reddit. What is one thing that you hated that a guest did in your house? Going through my sofa and desk for spare change. Not even secretly. They thought, or acted like, it was totally normal to pocket all the quarters they could find. 2 separate people. Guest got S-faced. Out of the blue, he started chugging vodka and wouldn't let go of my girlfriend when she asked. I pulled them apart and he tried to punch me. I ended up pinning him to the ground until the cops and an ambulance came. He was belligerent, yelling "frick you" at the cops. Ended up in handcuffs for his ride to the air. Needless to say, he's no longer welcome. To top it off, my friend's boyfriend was also there. Instead of helping me restrain the unruly guy, this boyfriend was taking pictures and videos and doing shots of Fireball whiskey. I was worried we were going to end up with a second belligerent drunk. Let me guess, according to him you and butthole for calling the cops. Had a house in college with a few buddies to save money on rent. Had a communal beer rule for all the roommates. We all usually took turns picking up a 12-pack every few days to keep things stocked. Under 21 dude comes over in the middle of the night one weekend with a car full of girls and a cooler. These visits are common. We are used to random friends dropping by at all hours. He heads straight for the fridge with cooler in hand. Okay, cool. Dude got beer somehow and wants to chill. Nope. He is putting our beer in his cooler and then heads for the door. Gets upset when we shut that down and make him put the beer back and says communal beer bro. Yeah. For the people that pay to live here. Dong. My dad used to be close friends with a guy named Ed. He and his wife invited us to all sorts of parties, then to their vacation house as we got to know them better. My mom and I really bonded with Ed's wife, so my mom suggested inviting them to dinner at our house. When the day arrived, the first thing, other than a greeting, was her comment about the salad my mom put out. "Oh, why is the lettuce wet?" And she began rolling out jabs from there on out. She pet our dog and some hair came off, so in a very snobby tone she points out, "Ed, do you see the clump of hair? They should vacuum." The final straw was when my dad asked Ed where they got the pizza for their one party when Queen Bee interjects, "Anyone who cuts their pizza with a knife over scissors, I cannot understand." The look of shock on my parents and my faces all must have been the same. We could not wait until they left. Needless to say, my dad stopped talking to Ed soon after. Good riddance. My friend trimmed his nails and left them on the floor because at his house his mom vacuums every day, whereas at my house we do it not so often. He's probably the reason she has to hoover every day. My sister had a party at my house back when she was in high school. I was in middle school at the time, and one of her friends got really angry that some guy at the party wouldn't hook up with her. She decided to go through our freezer, find a pizza, unwrap it, and throw it at the guy who was sitting in my living room on the new carpet. Not only did she waste a perfectly good pizza, she left marks on the carpet and also swung the freezer door open so hard that it now makes a horrible cracking noise every time it's opened. She also asked if she could sleep in my bed that night because I was sleeping in the basement with my friends. That bee slept on the floor. I'm trying to think of a scenario where I would consider throwing a frozen pizza at someone an acceptable response. I'm drawing a blank. Myself and my other flatmate just recently had an argument with our third flatmate over the behavior of his friend while a guest in our house. It's not one thing, because I couldn't choose which I hated the most. He walks right in without knocking. The third flatmate will leave the front door open for him, and he'll just break in through the security door downstairs. We've told them several times to freaking knock, but he just waltzes in whenever he likes, sometimes even when the third flatmate isn't even in the house. His idea of entertainment is to read out graphic accounts of debauchery from his phone and then laugh at them. I'm not sure if he genuinely thinks it's funny or if he's just trying to be edgy, but either way, what the frick. He also likes to entertain himself by drawing swastikas over my friend's whiteboard. Considering third flatmate is the only person in the flat that likes him and that whiteboard isn't even his, he really needs to stop that crap. We also have reason to believe he snoops through our things and possibly steals food. Needless to say, we've made it abundantly clear he's not welcome in the flat. Insult, disrespect my family, especially my father. I quietly asked my friend to leave because he insulted me by making fun of my father's weight. Something like that happened to me once. My little brother is a little shy and doesn't like crowds. She made fun of him and talked crap about him. Needless to say, we do not talk anymore. Once when I was about 15 years old, my aunt and uncle came over to visit. I was stoked. They were probably my favorite relatives. They were both youngish, and my uncle was really deep into cybercriminology. He was doing consulting work with the FBI at the time. Anyway, my bedroom was next to theirs, and in the middle of the night they started fricking really loudly. It was just really fricking weird. Who goes to visit family, knowing they're in a room next to a couple of kids, my brother was 9, and starts banging it out. It was really hard to look at them the same after that. Everything just had a pattern of awkwardness. I am so sorry. I would be so uncomfortable. I would just probably resort to utter denial and convince myself that their sounds were a result of them repeatedly and simultaneously stubbing their toes or getting percuts instead of them actually doing the deed. The thought of hearing relatives fricking makes me want to dry up and crumble away in the breeze. A guest discarded the fish I had made for lunch because he refused to eat around the bones. The bastard saw me come home from morning ice fishing, warm up, clean the fish, rainbows and bluegill, and fry them up. Took 2 bites and threw it in the trash instead of, say, giving it back to me or leaving his plate on the counter. No respect for the fish or my time and effort. That's xenophobic. I would have thrown him in the garbage. No one wastes delicious winter fish. Tells me what to do and how to do it. Was cooking bacon for him, and he says you're doing it wrong and, accidentally, dumps all the bacon onto my feet. I still have blisters. We were playing Xbox and he asked if he could download GTA on my Xbox. I said no, because I had almost no space, but when I took a bathroom break, he downloaded it, and played it for the whole day. Later, when my mom got home, she said to please be quiet because she was going to take a nap. My friend told me what to be, then I kicked him out. I would have kicked him out after dumping bacon on my freaking feet. Complain about everything. Context. This girl is on welfare and we're financially independent. I was on welfare for the same reason as her but pulled myself together. She continues to party, sort of makes an effort to study and tries to make a little money through painting and making sculptures and stuff. So not useless, but lazy in general and pretty entitled. She came to visit a few years back. She complained about the decor, my own works, gifted art from friends, floral arrangements, some cute sculptures, etc. Asked me to buy some of her art to replace it. I politely declined. She complained the guest bed was a fold-in-half affair, as the guest room serves other purposes. She complained that we buy basics food and wouldn't touch it. She complained that I generally eat paella and didn't have enough holiday guest food, still wouldn't eat anything that was own brand. She complained it was cold. We live in an older rural house. We had a fire running, but it can still be nippy. We're used to it but did everything to keep the heating up and get her water bottles. You know, being considerate. She complained about how bad our TV was, only basic channels, and that our net was restricted at the time due to cash problems. She complained about how close we are as a couple and tried to turn us on each other. Hilariously pathetic, but oh well. She complained we didn't have friends around she could talk to instead of us. Between complaining about the quality of service, she surfed the net on her iPad, talked about her latest expensive clothes, complained about how little she got to eat, complained that she didn't have a partner and generally whined about how little money she had as well as how much cool stuff she had. Also, one of her mates clued us in that she actually had plenty of cash at the time and was just scrounging. We kicked her out after a few days of that. The last day was the worst. So there was this chick that stayed at my house for about 5 weeks while they found a house and it was being prepared. Her husband is an old friend of my dad's, and my dad found this guy a job at his company. They had 2 small children, not including the 2 teens they left behind in Ohio when they moved out to Vegas, ages 3 and 1. List of things the bee did. 1. Told everyone she would cook dinners, only did so once. Also said she would clean up after her small children, never did. She lied to her husband and told him that she had cleaned, when she had actually just stayed on the couch all day. 2. The one night she did cook dinner, she cooked spaghetti. On this day 4 of the 6 ppl in my family had the runs, so they didn't eat. She yells at my mom about how my mom was afraid her spaghetti sauce was going to be better, so she lied and told us not to eat it. 3. Left sleeping pills out on countertops where my smaller siblings, 7 and 4 years old, could reach them. 4. We still have a ton of old toys from when I was smaller, because I normally took pretty good care of my stuff. This 3-year-old kid broke at least 60 little toys during the 5 weeks, leaving my 4-year-old sister devastated. 5. We eventually kicked them out for these reasons, and then some. My mom, after 4 months, still gets texts like "you're a selfish little bee. You use your husband and kids as a doormat." Lots of other stuff. 6. She left diapers out everywhere from her little 1-year-old. 7. Her kids drew on our baby grand piano with orange marker. She didn't even notice. 8. The day she left, she stole our toaster, lots of the toys, and a few other things. I think they are staying in an apartment somewhere, and I hope it's heck for her. Someone broke into my basement and tried to give herself an abortion once. After she fricked my husband in our bed, I had become fast friends with a woman from work who was renting a room in someone else's house, a fairly common thing where I live. She started telling stories about her roommate getting drunk and belligerent, and threatening suicide. Eventually she said it was getting worse, and she didn't feel safe, so she was going to find a new place. Out of concern, I offered her my couch for a week or 2 while she got sorted out. Everything started out fine, but she never found a place, and ended up staying for almost 4 months. During that time, she regularly drank to the point of blacking out, slept with at least 6 different men, including my husband's uncle, tried to frick me, and got fired from 3 jobs. I'm way too understanding, and very non-confrontational, but when I found out she was pregnant and didn't know who the father was, I asked that until she had made a decision about whether or not to abort. She not drink. She freaked out, and I had to ask her to find somewhere else to stay. She moved out, and I thought I had washed my hands of her. A few days later I came home from work and my husband told me she had stopped by while I was out to pick up the rest of her stuff. We had dinner, watched TV, and he got in the shower while I got ready for bed. When I pulled down the blankets to get into our marital bed, I found a piece of a condom wrapper. My marriage was a shambles anyway, for other reasons, so I didn't say anything about it to my husband. A week later, I brought a load of laundry down to the walkout basement and found a mattress laid on the floor, food wrappers, a battery-operated radio, several twat douches, and a large bag of some kind of herb. I googled and found that this particular herb can induce miscarriages if taken in large doses. I changed the lock on the basement and sent her a text message saying if I found evidence of her on our property again I would call the police. 3 days later she was fricking my neighbor in exchange for a place to stay. Edit 2. TL. DR. Husband stuck his dong in crazy, and so did the rest of the town. In high school I threw a party and one of about 10 people hanging out in the basement snapped the neck of my 1972 Les Paul Custom. Nobody came forward. Broke my heart. Only story in this thread that made me tear up. My brother ate my last sleeve of Thin Mints from the freezer when he was staying with us. That was 8 years ago. Haven't spoken to him since. He's dead to me. The only thing I've ever stolen was a box of Thin Mints. At summer camp, every cabin was supposed to get a box. One group didn't know about the cookies, so I took their box and they were never the wiser. No regrets. Okay, I get it guys. No regrets. Snuck away from a casual backyard barbecue to go frick her boyfriend in my basement. I found the used condom on the floor the next day, just hanging out, nowhere near a trash can. When I was pretty young, maybe 5 or 6, we had some family visit from India. It was my mom's cousin and her kids, who were around the same age as me, making the kids my second cousins I guess. Anyway, my second cousin wasn't exactly familiar with Western customs, specifically, how Western toilets and bathrooms work. In India they were used to eliminating waste in a hole in the floor. This concept doesn't exist in most US households and this confused my second cousin significantly. This led to him having to take a massive crap, and finding no hole in the bathroom floor, simply crap his massive crap all over the floor in the hopes that it would get absorbed into the ground. TL. DR. My second cousin from India got confused and took a massive crap on the bathroom floor. He probably then proceeded to wash his hands and face in the porcelain water basin that was on the floor. Had a Kirby vacuum salesman come in. We watched his whole presentation and my friend's wife offered him a drink. This is in Georgia, and he proceeds afterwards to go in the fridge and grab pizza. This no crap happened. I shouldn't talk crap about 6-year-olds, but my nephew once came over and crap all over the front of my toilet one night. He didn't tell me, and I only noticed the next morning when the crap had dried rock hard. I had to replace the toilet after multiple scrubbings failed to get all the crap off. Worst part is that his dad had to have known but just said, "Hey, frick it, I'll let someone else deal with my son's fesses." I just let it go. Tried to play rough with the cat, wrestling with him. The cat has a heart defect that causes potentially fatal palpitations, and I had to warn him to stop twice. It's not like he didn't know better, and he was a grown adult. I haven't invited the friend back since. I was having a party at my house and had to use the restroom. When I come back into the living room, this freaking prick is having an impromptu Mary Kay party. I am nice and just sit there while he takes an hour selling crap to my friends. Frick you anyone who does this stupid pyramid scheme balls. Last week I had a friend storm out of my dinner party because she didn't like that someone was arguing for points in categories. We let a friend of my daughter's stay in our house while he was a student teacher. He was desperately obese, well north of 500 pounds. I had to build a reinforced bed for him to sleep on, get seat belt extenders for the car, because I drove him to his student teaching assignment every day, and so forth. Oh yeah, and he broke the bathtub by just crushing it. Poor fiberglass tub didn't stand a chance. He stayed with us for a full semester. Didn't wash himself enough, we counseled him. Hid food under his bed. We didn't deny him food. The kitchen was open to him anytime, and just generally terrorized my teenage sons. When he graduated, he thought he was coming back to live with us while he looked for a job. Nope. We had already tossed the bedding and the memory foam mattress topper, and cleaned the heck out of the room, and fixed the tub, and gotten therapy for the kids. Someone got high and shot my refrigerator at my old apartment. Luckily, the bullet missed all of the condiments within. The person ran away. Somehow, nobody in the neighborhood called the police. My sister-in-law changed her kid's crappy diaper right on our carpet in front of the TV as we were all watching a movie. I suggested to her that she could take him back to the bedroom, where if she smeared crap on the sheets, it would be easier to wash, but she said, "No, this is fine." Then I offered her a bag to put the crappy diaper in, but she decided it was just fine to toss it in the kitchen trash can. Side note, while stationed in Egypt, much of our medical research was on diseases that are transmitted through feces. I have a severe crap phobia. Drugs. Oh, also he left his Brazilian fiancée and their 1-year-old child here and moved to the other side of the country. That was nice of him. Stole a key to my business and made a copy of it which he gave to some local juveniles. The juveniles took thousands of dollars worth of merchandise from me. Happy ending. Everyone was caught. Merchandise was returned. Restitution was made. House guest is now a felon. A kid almost shot my mom's eye out with his BB gun. I know he was kid, but you don't go shooting your BB gun everywhere as soon as you walk into people's houses. After getting us, me, a friend, and the guy I'm talking about, evicted from our last place and then freaking off to New York from California so he could spend a few weeks freaking my best friend's sister. He begged us to let him stay in our new place after he got back. During the week he spent with us, his stuff was strewn about everywhere in the house. He complained because I left for work while a CD was on repeat while he was there. He was sitting literally 5 feet away from the stereo where a simple button press or knob turn would have stopped it, and he yelled at us for leaving his food out on the counter when we hadn't touched his food. On top of that, he didn't tell us he had his cat with him. We assumed it was still with his mom, where it had been while he was in NY, and got butthurt when we explained that it was against our lease and we didn't want to get evicted again. He refused to keep the cat out of the windows, where our landlord could see it when he drove by, and proclaimed that it would be cruel and impossible to even try. All the while he was generally acting like a shithead and not being very grateful for the risk we were taking after he got us evicted from our last housing situation. However, my housemate and I didn't really see everything going until we compared notes. The situation came to a head when the weekend came. Shithead was going to visit some people an hour away and would be back Sunday night. The last thing he said as he walked out the door was, "I'm off to do all of blank S drugs." My housemate and I compared notes, realized the situation was much worse than either of us thought, and decided he had to go. Knowing what kind of guy Shithead was, and how long he could drag it out, we decided that the only thing to do was to get rid of him right away. We packed up all his crap, and when he got back we put his cat into a carrier and gave him his cat and his bag and told him he was persona non grata. Not a single friend was surprised or offended that we did that, so even though I still feel bad for having done it, I know I did the right thing. TLDR, rude guest is rude, goes off to do drugs. My wife's parents and her sister stayed in town with us for a week. Her sister made war on the upstairs toilet, tried to flush it and didn't tell anyone it was clogged. Her mother went in 2 hours later and dropped another deuce on it in the dark. Tried to flush, threw down towels to soak it up, left it for me to find at 6 AM the next morning. Try to look your in-laws in the face after plunging their corn-laden crap out of your guest bathroom first thing in the morning. I had to shower again after my shower. I had to carry soaked crap-laden towels down the stairs and wash them. I had to tell my toddler that it wasn't grandma that stunk up the house. I had to scrub the bathtub from where the towels were thrown to the side. My nasal cavities are permanently scarred. I am not the same man anymore. Had a house party a good few years ago. Friend of mine went into my parents' room after I'd specifically told people that was the only room I'd like people to stay out of, and slept in their bed. Not cool, man. There was this exchange student with a French type name, let's call him Jake because I can't remember his real name, who was in a church group with my roommate in college. This guy was an all-around amiable fellow, but for whatever reason, this dude freaking reeked of BO. My roommate assumed it was either medical or just that in his culture, they didn't have the same bathing deodorant practices that we have in America. Fair enough, but Jake's was quite overweight, and bathing can be particularly important for overweight people, as any nurse who's had to clean them will tell you. Jake stayed on our couch for a week, because he needed a place to stay for some reason. Maybe his roommates kicked his stank butt out, and not once did he take a shower. This guy smelled so bad that I could follow him through the house with my eyes closed. Even after he left the room, you could tell he'd been there. It was honestly utterly disgusting, and I urged my roomie to have a conversation with him about it. I've never met anyone that smelled worse. After he left, you couldn't sit on the couch anymore. It became trash. This huge freaking douche that came uninvited to a house party I was throwing. This butthole had the gall to, while I was in the room, say, "Wow, I really feel like breaking something," and rip one of my kitchen's nice cabinets off by the hinges. I immediately went into rage mode and got a golf club and told him to get the frick out of my house. I found out later that he also stole a bunch of jewelry from my parents' room, almost 17k worth. He wouldn't admit he did it, so we got cops involved and he ended up going to jail and getting dropped from college, so he pretty much got what he deserved. What I wouldn't give to be able to take a swing at him though. A friend brought his 5-year-old son over and was too busy playing Xbox to monitor him. They allow him to discipline their cat, and the boy took it upon himself to hit my dogs for not doing what he wanted. I crated them to spare them more abuse and corrected the boy that it's not okay to hit them. He runs off, grabs a copper music piece my grandpa gave me and shakes it. I take it from him gently and he flips out. They don't really tell him no, so he acts out even more. Did so this time by throwing DVDs and books off my bookcase. Aims the books right at my dog's water bowl. I stop him and he runs off. I find him tossing 4 loads of folded laundry off my guest bed and into the floor. I put him in timeout and my friend didn't stop me. He asked about his parenting, and I let him know where I felt he needed to reinforce structure and limits on his son's behavior. They stayed another hour and left, but it will be a while before I will want his son over. Which pains me BC. I'm a big believer in kids, spouses, etc. always being welcome wherever their parents are welcome. What's the worst house guest experience you've had? I had a friend who needed a place to stay for a few days, so my parents let him stay at our house. He thought he could just stay longer without ever mentioning it or talking to my parents about it. He refused to find another place to live or try to make money, so he ended up staying with us for almost a month. He would trap people in conversations where he would just talk about himself for 2 hours straight. He complained about us not having the foods he wanted, would not stop talking about he was an incredible musician, and said his future plan was to go to LA despite having no job prospects, connections, a place to live, money, or any valid IDs. Within hours of him leaving, he texted me about how he wanted to come over the next day. He is not allowed at our house anymore. Sounds like an energy vampire. My roommate started seeing a guy who didn't have a car and lived in the town over, about a 20-minute drive. She would pick up him from his house and bring him to ours, but she didn't always want to drive him home the next morning because she would have to work early. This quickly turned into him staying at our apartment full time, despite protests from my second roommate and I. After about 2 weeks, I noticed over $100 was missing from my wallet. He and I were the only two in our apartment all day. My wallet had been in my bedroom while I was watching TV in the living room. He'd been locked away in her room all day, but I also can't see down the hall that led to all of our bedrooms from their living room. So it was easy to figure out that he had snuck down the hall and gotten into my wallet. But she refused to believe me. I kept my bedroom door locked for a while and kept my valuables inside until I was able to get a camera set up. Then I left my door unlocked one day with a small amount of cash and my wallet in front of the camera to lure him. It worked like a charm and I got him on camera stealing from me again. Showing them the video got my roommate to believe me, but he still tried to deny it. He got dumped and kicked out, but I lost about $150 that I never saw again. My former friend begged me to help her find a place where her special needs kiddos could stay in the same school services where her husband wouldn't look for her after supposedly finding questionable material on his PC. I work with special needs populations including abuse victims, so it made sense to come to me. I gave her an older laptop I had for her use so she could turn in the house PCs. I bought her a new phone. I took them in myself, which meant giving up my actual room for several weeks and sleeping on a futon. I also spent a lot of time babysitting so she could go talk to lawyers providers. Imagine my surprise when I went to pick up the kids from school one day when she supposedly had court to extend the restraining order and bumped into dad and grandma. Eventually it came out that there was no restraining order, no court filings, no suspect files found. Mom had a new boyfriend and had told her husband she was divorcing him and her family wouldn't take her in. Please tell me how this ended. Don't leave me hanging. Some family friends came over with their 30-year-old son unannounced, took a nap on our sofa like full on shoes off, made us turn off the TV because it was too loud, then Venmo charged us for snacks they brought even though we didn't ask for anything. I literally felt like I was the one who was visiting. She stole all of my booze, pee on my couch, tore up the flower bed to the side of my driveway, and destroyed my guest bathroom. This all happened after I'd fallen asleep. She was a guest of a tenant roommate and that roommate was told either her friend wasn't allowed over ever again or she'd have to find a new place to live. One of my best buddies from high school called me up and begged for me to come get him from a town about 3 hours away. The idea was he would stay with us for a couple weeks while he looked for work and then get his own place. 6 months later I ended up renting him a room for 1 month and dropping him off with his junk and wishing him well. His father had warned me he would drain me dry and he wasn't kidding. All those months he was supposedly using my vehicle to look for work, he was instead going out to a local bar. Every bottle in our liquor cabinet was drained down to the last finger. Yeah, cause if you leave that last little dribble in the bottle you haven't officially taken the pee. Couple came for a weekend to my small apartment, surprised that they brought 3 dogs and an extra friend. The puppy took a dump on my floor in the night, which nobody got up to clean. Another dog had a crate but managed to get a hold of a carpet outside of the crate, drag it in, and shred it. They also chewed up cardboard and wooden furniture. When they left, all the shredded stuff was just where it fell. Some people should not be pet owners. My mom's cousin and her husband went for a short visit to our house. She was 5 months pregnant then. She and her husband didn't leave until the baby was 2 months old. Then when leaving, "It's a pity we could only pay you a short visit. We'd have loved to stay a bit more, but Jimmy's starting college tomorrow." A former friend of ours called us and said that her house caught on fire, so naturally we offered a soft place to land while she was dealing with the fallout. So we went and picked her up, brought her home, and got her set up for the night. The next day, she grabbed what she could from her apartment and brought it over to our house. My wife washed all of her clothes, which by the way smelled the way you'd expect from being in a house fire. Unfortunately, that scent is really hard to get out, so our house smelled of fire for a long time as my wife was washing the clothes multiple times. Eventually, we realized she was not trying at all to get her life back in order. She also wasn't helping at all at our house with getting her things together. She apparently just decided that she was going to just stay with us and coast, I guess. Ultimately, she then started being really critical of anything we did, tried to start drama, and was generally unpleasant to be around. What finally broke the camel's back was that I returned one day to find her and someone we had never met before smoking in our front porch. Not really a big deal, but it was odd that she didn't let us know that she was inviting anyone into our house. The next day I went to take my Adderall that I had just filled and noticed that there were like 5 left from the prescription. Her and her friend helped themselves to my meds. After that she announced that she was going to stay somewhere that she was welcome, and that we could throw the clothes and items away that we had at our house because she didn't want them anymore because they smelled too much like smoke. The best came after she moved out. We read a story about the fire in the newspaper about the cause of the fire. She had caused it by smoking on the back deck of her apartment by carelessly not putting the cigarette out. We never really saw her again. She tried to make contact but we just noped out. She ended up moving in with some of our other friends, which we tried to warn them about, and ended up almost accidentally killing their dog due to carelessness before being kicked out by them. Yeah, she sucked. Just for your information, putting vinegar in the washing machine with any clothing or bedding will take basically any smell out of them, including the smell of a house fire. I can vouch from personal experience. My ex-wife's friend had her car break down, and our apartment was right on a bus route to her job. She was supposed to stay over for a week while she got her car fixed. After 2 months and a lot of warning, we packed her bags for her and put them by the door. Wife's cousin stayed a couple days with us. After he left, I discovered he purchased about $60 worth of pee on Directv. Who are these monsters who pay for pee, especially on TV, let alone someone's other than theirs? Just jerking it in the living room in the afternoon while everyone pretends the world isn't burning down around them. My parents came over and started snooping through my closet while I was making tea. They found some sex toys and proceeded to get mad at me for having them in my own house, in my own bedroom. They wouldn't have found them if they would have behaved like normal people. My aunt came to visit for what was supposed to be a week or two and didn't leave for almost a year when I was a kid. She redecorated my room and even put up pictures of herself. Now the running joke in my family is to randomly leave pictures of yourself around the house when we visit people. Mayo, that's so funny. Reminds me of a guy I used to work with who used to take pictures of himself and his family to IKEA. Over a long while he put them in the frames in all the displays. Nearly pee myself when I went one day and spotted a pic of him on a beach somewhere in a bedroom display. My old roommate told me she had a friend who had fallen on rough times and needed a spot to crash for a while. No worries, I told her. Oh, big worries. He was a professional beatboxer, but more than that he was a professional smoker. Like, I'm fine with weed generally, but this dude was on 12-15 blunts a day and would roll one as soon as he rolled his tighty whitey clad butt off of our couch. So for like 4 months, as soon as I woke up, it was nothing but clouds of white owl and brrrrmmchkchk frakafrakach kabrim. He didn't fall on rough times. He was a rough time. My dad owned a business his whole life and was in the process of hiring new installers. One applicant came in from out of town and my dad, being the kind man he was, offered for him to stay in our home. When the morning came, the man went to take a shower. My parents heard the water turn on and it stayed on for a really long time. After an hour and a half of running water, my mom made my dad go check on him. My dad went upstairs, picked the lock on the bathroom door, and found blood and a limp body on the floor next to the running shower. The man had overdosed, lost consciousness, hit his head on the shower side, and died. He was dead. right there on the bathroom floor that I used for 10 years. One thing is for sure, he won't be coming back to our house again. Moral of the story, always do drugs sitting down. That would be the girl visiting my sister-in-law who decided it would be funny to repeatedly prank call 911. I got a very angry call from the local police station saying we either stopped or they'd be sending a squad car over. Apologized profusely to the officer and thanked him for calling us first. She was not invited back to her house. She was 17 and definitely old enough to know better. I offered someone a ride home from class in college, was hoping to make a new friend. This guy proceeded to take his shoes off and put his smelly socks on my leather dashboard, then critique my driving and tell me why manual transmissions are stupid. Murder would have been justified if he was a house guest. Sister-in-law house sat when we were out of town. There were tons of disrespectful presents left for us. A cookie crumb trail of condom wrappers, which led to an actual used condom. Like WTF. But the worst was after cleaning all that up, which was just aggravating and stupid. There was a putrid smell I couldn't put my finger on, until I finally opened a drawer in the dresser in the guest room. She had left a takeout container in there, half an omelette that had gone rancid. I gotta hope she just had to go quick and forgot all that crap was there when she left. Either way, we took our key back from her. It's so interesting to see some people's habits. Yikes. Housemaid had people come over, order a pizza, decide they didn't want it and refuse to answer the door so they didn't have to pay, at 4 AM. Pizza guy could hear them through the door so kept knocking louder and louder. I eventually went to the door and opened it, then explained to the pizza guy what was going on, so that they didn't blacklist the property, and forced them to pay. As they were packing to leave the next day, I noticed them trying to take some of my extra PS4 controllers by sneaking them into their bag. I'm normally an introvert, but already being cranky from no sleep, I lost my crap at that point. Called them a disgusting thief and told them to gtfo. Controllers are expensive, frick those hoes. I had surgery and was on bed rest for a week. I asked my cousin, who was living with me at the time, to keep an eye on me, as I was on heavy painkillers. I stayed on the couch and let her use my bedroom. When I recovered, I found used hair weave piled up on clean towels in the bathroom cabinet, a douche nozzle behind my nightstand, trash piled all the way up the wall in the kitchen, dirty dishes everywhere, a plate of rancid food in the microwave, ketchup and mustard smeared on the floors, and she had stolen a bunch of clothing and CDs, along with one of my iPhone chargers. I kicked her butt out immediately. A friend I haven't seen in a year or so called me last weekend wanting to catch up, so he came over. I didn't realize he was blackout drunk until he walked in, and I didn't realize how to defuse the situation. It started with him taking a crap in my bathroom, and instead of flushing it he just put both seats down, went into my fridge to grab a craft IPA that I have been saving for a rainy day and drank it, went outside, and out of nowhere he starting saying the N-word. He's never been racist as far as I know. At this point I told him to get the frick out nicely or calm down, but I also didn't want him to crash his car home as he lives an hour away. He then said he's going to go get cigarettes, so I offered to drive him. As soon as we're down the road he yells at me to pull over because he has to pee, again calling me the N-word for no apparent reason. I told him to just wait 3 minutes, and he takes out his dong and puts it into his beacon and just pees everywhere and then throws it outside. By this time I'm livid and he grabs my arm to apologize, but his hand was soaked in pee, so he basically just wiped it all over me. I knew I was going to punch him in the face if I didn't get to the gas station, so once I got there I told him to go inside. When he went and I peeled out of there and called his GF saying she needed to pick him up from that gas station. I took a shower and an hour later his GF calls me and says he's in the backseat of a cop car because he called 911 asking for C. Needless to say, that's the last time I'll be seeing him. I was on my honeymoon with my husband and we let his dad stay at our house, but said he had to be out by the time we got back. We let him know when we were on our way home and expected him to be gone. We get back. He was gone but had not gotten his stuff out of the house. On top of that, he trashed the place like a group of teenagers, empty pizza boxes and trash laying around. He came back and stayed around for a bit and asked me if I was mad at him. Like of course I'm mad. What do you expect? Ran into a guy I used to call a friend and let him stay with me for a while as he was down on his luck. I guess we'd ran out of toilet paper, so he used a washcloth and left it at the side of the toilet. Kicked him out and found out later he walked away with some of my CDs. Some mutual friends let him stay, against my advice. They came home one day to find him passed out on the couch with his pants around his ankles. After they kicked him out, they found out he'd racked up $900 in phone sex charges. Frick you, Noel. You always were and always will be a piece of crap. My mill joked about taking my newborn with her to her state and called me an inferior parent. 8 days post-birth. I told her I'd break her arm if she tried to leave the house with my baby. She cried because I didn't find her joke funny. Never even got to spend any time in this apartment. I agreed to rent an apartment with my younger sister on her road to recovery from drug use, and we all thought she was doing well. I paid for the first month's rent and deposit, which is standard. She moved in a week early because I was working night shifts and the whole process started on a Monday. That weekend I got to move in. I found out my debit card was locked out because she stole it and attempted to withdraw money too many times. It didn't get any better after that, sadly. Oh, this is a pretty good one. So I had a really old good friend call me and tell me they needed a place to stay for maybe a few days or a week when I lived in the Pacific Northwest. I of course said yes. Then she told me her girlfriend was coming too. Okay, great. They show up, and when they get to my porch she tells me her girlfriend has strep throat. At first I think okay, whatever. But then I stop and think isn't that highly contagious? But they are already here. So I just kind of start thinking to myself that I'll have to somehow keep them to my spare bedroom and sterilize the crap out of everything. But then I'm just wondering why my friend didn't tell me in advance, or if they don't know how contagious it is. Like if my girlfriend had strep, it'd go get a hotel and not subject my friend to that. After about a day, my friend tells me via text she has to leave, which at first I'm relieved, but then she asks if her girlfriend can just stay at my place. I don't know her. I've never met her in my life. I tell her I have another couple that need to come stay with me, which was true, and that I'm not comfortable housing someone I don't know who is sick. She says that is fine, but then when she comes to get her stuff she acts all pee and says well see you sometime, maybe, and I don't hear from her for a long time after. Kinda fricked up she put me in that situation tbh. Yesy, that's not a friend. That's a former friend masquerading as a friend. Well, this one happened a few years ago, but the husband of my great aunt came to visit us. Mind you, he was like 80 something years old, so he goes to the bathroom to do his bussiness, and he comes down. Now he smells a little bit, but we all brush it aside. Then when he sits down and after a while gets back up to leave, you can see crap stains on the sofa. Not only that, but my mom then goes upstairs and finds the bathroom full of crap. Not full on crap, but a bunch of it was sprayed in the walls, etc. To this day we haven't spoken about it, and that man passed away around a year ago. To this day we haven't spoken about it, and that man passed away around a year ago. I think it is past time to talk about it. If it can't be funny now, it'll never be funny. My brother Todd is a drug addict and an alcoholic. Before mom and dad finally had enough and got a restraining order, they kept thinking that if they kept him at home he'd get sober. He would wander the streets and bring home homeless people who were also strung out in the middle of the night. One time it was this woman who used our bathroom, taking a shower and leaving an absolute mess, including her soiled thong on the bathroom floor. She also stole some stuff. We didn't know about her until the morning when she left my brother's room because despite being high as a kite she was quiet. And for once my brother, despite being high himself, remembered the alarm code, which was unusual because he normally forgets it when he's high drunk. Most of the time we'd catch him bringing home strange women and men to sleep in his room because the alarm would go off and wake us all up. Every time dad would throw them both out and change the garage door code for the night so he couldn't get back in. Another time one of my mom's now former friends came over in a rage, forcing her way in. She had been at urgent care and got tired of waiting. She had a bladder infection that was so bad she was bleeding. She left the bathroom a bloody mess and screamed at mom the entire time before finally leaving. Mom cut her out of her life after that. He cranked my dad's speakers up to the max and blew them. They were from the 70s, so impossible to replace or repair. Then he clogged our toilet, grabbed a bunch of grandma's quilts to sop up the water. He then tried to stop the water by violently shaking the tank, cracking the bowl and dislodging it from its base. In a panic he tried to bolt from the house. His wet feet slipped on the wood floor and he crashed into a wall, leaving a nice body-sized impression. That's how my brother's friends was barred from the house. A high school buddy of mine called to ask if his late teens daughter and her 2 friends could stay at our house for a night, as they were traveling around the world. Of course, and we even gave them our master bedroom and master bath, so they could clean up and spoil themselves. Not to brag, but we have a kick butt setup. Those 2 rooms are about 700 square featuring. Shortly after seeing their new digs, they announced that they were staying for 6 days, actually assuming we'd let them have our room the entire time. We said, no, 1 night of fun, then down to the basement, which is still pretty nice. They left the next morning when we're out, didn't say thank you, took a bunch of snack food, and made us sound like horrible hosts to my buddy. The entitlement was laughable. Sounds like your buddy raised a proper pose. The clown that wouldn't leave. It's become family legend. My mother hired a clown for my brother's 2nd or 3rd birthday party. My mother made the mistake of offering her a cup of coffee after she was done performing, and she seemed to take that as a cue to stay for a while. Hours pass. The party guests are long gone and the clown is still there drinking the coffee, chatting with my mother still in full makeup and outfit. She ended up staying the entire day until my mom got fed up and told her she had to go because she had to prepare dinner. I was 23, just signed a lease for a duplex with my girlfriend, got new furniture and a new computer. Then my brother shows up, one with a broken foot, and says he can't work so he stays with me while he acts grateful, and I had a spare bedroom that was using as an office. My new computer was in the room. He downloaded so much pee it crashed the hard drive. Had to wipe the hard drive and reinstall Windows. I put a parental block on the computer after that. He finally got a job and pretty much spent all his money on drugs. I would ask him to pitch in money for food bills and would be totally delusional, saying he gave $500 last week. I think I got $100 from him in the 6 months he was there. He got fricked up on pills and passes out and pee himself on my brand new couch. Then tried to fight me when I yelled at him and said he had to pay for it to get cleaned. I told him to get out at that point, then it was a nightmare. He would send threatening messages to me saying how he was going to kill me. Cops got called. Cops took some statements, wrote down the text messages and didn't do crap at the time. 3 months later they arrest him and our mom calls me saying it's all my fault and I need to drop the charges. Needless to say, I'm not real close with my family these days. Oh yeah, I had a bed in the office that totally covered in pee after he stayed there. Also found a duffel bag full of pee in the room and a few dozen little baggies with coke residue in them. Cousin and her kid, 18, came to stay on our apartment BC. The kid needed a psychiatrist evaluation and treatment. The city they lived in didn't have a facility for it, but ours did. She said they'll stay about 3 weeks. We said yeah, anything to help. They ended up staying for more than 4 months. Didn't put a single penny for groceries. Took showers that lasted for ages. Left the heat running. Lights on in every room. Just wasteful all around. In my family we don't have dinner. Just some tea and bread. But her and her kid needed to have dinner. So she would sometimes take the food I had set up for lunch for the next day and give it to her kid, who BTW had the appetite of a monster. So a lot of times I would rush in the morning to assemble the lunch packs and discover there was nothing left. If there wasn't any food ready, she would just take whatever she wanted from the fridge and prepare it. Fancy steak we were saving for the weekend, gone. She even gave the kid half of my sister's birthday cheesecake before the party. Maybe the kid needed psychiatric evaluation due to poor parenting. Husband of friend came for Christmas and she was out of town. He brought the dog, who had diarrhea. Dog humped our dog for hours till our dog was covered in ST. Husband spouted racist crap and my kids laughed at him. Had to wash our dog in the kitchen after he left. Friend divorced now. What's the story of the one kid never allowed back over at your house? Me and the kid were around 9 and were playing games on my DS. After she went home I noticed that one of my games was missing. Asked her later if she had it. She said no, but I wasn't really convinced. Few days after that I was on the phone with another friend and told her the story and how I still believed the kid stole the game. Turns out my friend had her phone on loudspeaker and the kid was over and could listen to everything I said. Next time I met her she threw the game at me and insulted me. Didn't want her back at my house afterwards. One of my friends got banned from a kid's house when he was younger cause during a sleepover he reportedly sucked several people's toes. Dang, a sneaky serial toe sucker has to be the weirdest one here. Pretended to be a cat the whole time. I remember him crouched on the stairs on all fours, meowing plaintively and staring at me through the railing while I shook my head at him. No mom, I don't want to go play with him. Yes mom, I will just stay in the kitchen. So's youngest half brother plays kitty too. Granted he's 3, but still weirds me out. I could tolerate it until his slightly older sister started calling it the Pirate P game. Kevin the underwear thief. We were around 10 and playing with Lego in my room. He left to go use the washroom. I vaguely remember thinking he was gone for a while and was planning to joke around with him about having to drop a massive deuce. 10 minutes later I hear my mom exploding and yelling for my stepdad. He had snuck into my sister's room and was shoving her underwear down his pants and she caught him when she was coming up to see if we wanted a snack. Apparently this wasn't the first time either. Never saw Kevin again and his family moved a couple months later. What the frick, Kevin? We never actually banned anyone from the house while my daughter was growing up, but from grades 1-5 we did ask for prior notice before one particular friend came over. We needed time to child-proof the house. For a good 4 years, every time this girl came over she would manage to break something. Sometimes just one thing, sometimes multiple things, sometimes just small items, sometimes it was actual structural damage. If we knew she was coming over, all flatware and glass drinking vessels were put away and paper or plastic was used. All solar yard lights were quickly removed from the walkway. Anything that could smash, squash, or feel physical pain was shepherded out of the vicinity. She wasn't maliciously destructive, she just had no idea where her body was in space. Happily, this turned around for her by middle school to the point where she actually became a pretty good athlete, and she was always a sweetheart, but man, for those few years she was a human wrecking ball. My son was this kid. He was always big for his age, and he just couldn't be gentle about anything. He'd just plow into things and then get sad when they would break. He's in high school now, and his brain finally caught up to his size. It's very kind of you to allow that child in your home. As a parent of that kid, I appreciate it. Neighbor kid started just coming over to hang out with one of my kids. He was never respectful of my kid's stuff and would occasionally throw toys. The day I saw him throw a toy and a rock at our dog was the final straw. I told that little crap to get out of my house and I said he was never allowed to be near my house or my kids again. He lived across the street, and I don't think I saw him more than once after that. His family moved away about 1.5 years later. Jeez, I hate it when kids try to harm dogs. His name was Jacob. This was my 10th birthday. He was messing around and found BB pistol my older brother had. He was pretending to be gangster with it, holding it sideways and talking tough. We kept telling him to put it down, and he keeps yelling about popping a cap in our butt and he accidentally shoots my dad in the leg. My parents call his parents and tell them they need to come pick him up immediately. While they were upstairs on the phone, he accidentally took a bow and shot an arrow down the hall into my bedroom door. Jesus God, this scenario scares me. We live in Texas, where everyone has real guns, so I'm always paranoid when I send my 10-year-old son to someone's house for a playdate. If you see a gun, don't assume it's a toy and don't touch it is our playdate mantra. At my birthday, he fell asleep on the toilet and fell off and got crap everywhere. Instead of cleaning it up, he just left without saying anything. He left his shirt and shoes behind, so he was half naked. The great crap and run, we called it. He was 31 years old. Well, shite. For some ungodly reason I invited a boy that lived behind me over to hang out one afternoon. When he arrived he ate all of my snacks. I literally mean all of my snacks. ate my brownies and potato chips and goldfish crackers, spent his whole visit watching my older brother play Call of Duty in the living room, and when I tried to get him to come play with me he told me I was too fat to be attractive to him so he would never date me and I need to leave him alone. When I finally got him to leave, he kicked my dog on his way out. The next time he tried to come over he showed up and knocked on our door, and when I answered he said, "Are you gonna come hang out or what?" I blatantly responded, "No, you're mean to me and I don't like you. Go away," and slammed the door in his face. He was never allowed past our fence ever again. Frick that kid. Lived nearby, came over, ate all the snacks, watched Call of Duty. Sounds like me. I'm sore. Called you fat. Kicked your dog, etc. Okay, so maybe it wasn't me. My older sibling had a slumber party when we were in elementary school. One of the friends, who I'll call C, woke early the next morning, marched over to the bottom of the staircase near my parents' bedroom, and screamed, "Get your butt down here and make my breakfast," to my mother. She barreled down the steps with utter fury in her eyes. C never stayed at our house again. That's incredible. Like, it's actually so far outside my experience that it is hard to believe. When I was 12, had a friend stay the night. Woke up in the middle of the night to find him smashing my little brother's seashell collection. Never let him back over or spoke to him. He moved out of state a month later and never heard from him again. Actually, no one I know heard from him after that. On a beach somewhere fulfilling his lifelong goal. One of my little brother's friends. Mum told all the boys to not go in the garden because she was growing habaneros. This kid ignored her. Naturally, he went and messed with the hot peppers just because he could. Then proceeded to be an idiot and touch his eyes. Then went to the bathroom to pee and touched his private parts. It was a whole scene. Instant justice. She stole my mother's mobile phone. This was around 2004 to 2005. While I was asleep she made tons of prank calls to local people. We lived in an incredibly isolated small town. One of the people she called was the elderly grandparents of a boy from our school who were raising him because his parents were dead. She called and called them over and over asking for the boy in creepy tones. They told me later, my mum is a really chill person, but when she woke up to tons of voice messages verbally assaulting her and threatening to go to the police, she nearly aborted me. The girl confessed to me, but that was the day after I had to call everyone she rang and apologize to them while they yelled at me. Mostly because my mum wouldn't believe I had no idea what had happened. Safe to say she wasn't allowed back. We were basically best friends. He even slept over a couple of times. Then one day, I fell off my bike really awkwardly and scratched my knee pretty bad. He started laughing but then seemed to panic and rode off. I had to limp home and couldn't walk for the next few days. We never hung out after that. In middle school I became the nerd and he became the leader of the local gang. Sounds like he freaked out when you saw his true colors and realized he needed to find a new friend. Living a new house trying to make friends. My daughter was 6 and her new friend a little older and had been bragged on by the mom as being raised right, attending the Christian school because of the bad influence in the public school, etc. Anyway, my wife is on our back porch watching the girls play in the park about 75 yards away. Suddenly she hears the good Christian girl yell at our daughter. I said, "Get off the fricking swing." Our daughter had no clue what she meant, just knowing her new friend was flipping out, so ran crying back home. The other mother was in completely denial, saying there was no way her sweet child could have said such a thing, so my wife was obviously mistaken. I so hate parents that put their kid on a pedestal like that. My husband ordered pizza for my daughter and her friend. We'll call her T. He put the pizza $sign on the table next to the front door. When the pizza arrived, the $sign was not there. After he paid for the pizza, he had the girls empty their pockets. Of course, T had the exact amount he had left on the table in her pocket. She insisted she has brought it from home. After a call to her dad, he insisted she return the money but never made her apologize. Instead, made excuses for her. In retrospect, my daughter realized that there was a direct correlation before T's visits and $sign missing from her bedroom. She was banned from our house. He lived in my neighborhood for a few years. I hung out with him a bit and we played Super Smash Bros. At my house a few times. We went on vacation, came home and he was in my house playing when we got home. Apparently he broke in to hang out at my house. He tried again and was arrested. They moved out a few months later. The little piece of crap. The incident happened one summer day in 2014. I was babysitting for my best friend so she could go out with her husband. I had babysat numerous times before, but Little Poss's behavior started escalating and I began making unbelievable excuses like I have to do my taxes or I just donated blood to get out of babysitting. But after this one day, I told her flat out I couldn't have him in my house ever again. The evening started with him finding my vitamins while I was in the bathroom and dumping them out all over my carpet. He was 7 so he knew they weren't candy but just wanted to cause a mess. Then he next said he had to go to the bathroom where he proceeded to pull the wet wipes out from a new package and mix them with an entire roll of toilet paper and put them in the bowl of the toilet until the mound was literally overflowing onto the floor. And then he decided to pee all over the mound, the toilet and the floor. My husband came home from work about this time and sternly talked to him about it and we thought he got the message because he didn't act up again for the rest of the night. I wish that's where the story ends. But unfortunately for us, we didn't catch his coup de grace until the next morning. Little Poss enacted such a clever revenge. I can't help but be in awe at his villainy and cleverness. What we didn't find out until the next morning was that Little Poss went into our kitchen and switched off our refrigerator. So when we went to make ourselves breakfast in the morning, a huge puddle of water surrounded the fridge, and all of our food was warm and had to be thrown out. When I recounted all of this to my friend, she admitted that any time he gets in trouble, he'll switch off the fridge, but she's been able to catch him in the act. Never again. This kid would come over to use our bathroom, just to pee all over the floor. Happened a few times before my parents would tell him to go home. Just imagining some kid walking through your door to pee all over the rug and then leaving is making me laugh. This girl named Kayla who lived in my apartment building came over to watch Mean Girls. After spotting my hamster and seeing corn kernels in his food, she was convinced that he ate popcorn. I told her that he didn't. Despite this, she fed him handfuls of popcorn as she made her way to the bathroom multiple times throughout the movie. The next day, he was dead. I was 8. Hyponatremia sodium overdose. This girl I was friends with grew jealous that I got along with my little sister so well and that we always looked out for each other. This girl is like 5-6 years older than my sister. One day, when no one else was at the playground, she hit my little sister on the head for no dang reason other than jealousy. She was so proud of it too. Banned from our house and, apparently, her mom banned her and her brother from the playground. More than a decade later and I still want to punch her in the face. Ugh, frick you, Vanessa. Sounds like something a Vanessa would do. 11 or 12-year-old boy. Family moved into a house 2 down from me that the owners decided to rent out when they moved. First thing my 9-year-old son tells me it's how cool this kid's throwing knives are. Then tells me he's allowed to pee in the corner of his bedroom. Then tells me he and another neighbor were drinking his mom's wine. Then he smashed another neighbor girl in the face extremely hard with an ice ball. Wet snow he must have worked on for a while. Made her bleed. After all of that, he pulled a knife on another neighborhood boy and kicked his bike over. Also he came into my garage and started going through my tool chest. Parents are tweakers and getting kicked out of the house. Feel bad for the boy. You can hear his mom going crazy on him at all times of day and night. Call CPS. Nobody ever got banned from my house, but I was never allowed at my best friend's house after an incident when I was a little kid, like way back in 2004. Her dad was building a clubhouse outside from wood and scratch materials. My friend got this brilliant idea to throw a bunch of mud on the clubhouse so we could garner sympathy from our other neighbors and get money from them. I think she was inspired by the cartoon Ed, and Eddie. So she and I went outside and started throwing big slabs of mud on the clubhouse. Our hands and arms were covered in mud. Then, her mom ran outside the house and came up to us and started screaming at me, saying I was disrespectful and a disgusting brat. Well, my friend, who was the ringleader of the whole freaking thing, just silently stood there and watched me cry. Then I went home, and the lady called my mom, who beat me senseless. It was awful, and I was never allowed back. After that, I never really went to anybody's house. LMAO. Both your mom and your friend's mom sound awful. My siblings and I were friends with the neighbor girl who was what I would call a brute of a child. She peed on our couch and caught our stove on fire. Separate occasions. The final straw was when she knocked my sister's tooth out. I'm surprised my parents kept letting her come back, but real physical harm was where they decided to draw the line. Caught our stove on fire. I use a natural gas stove and had to read this several times before I figured out why that was a problem. I light my stove on fire every day. When my sister started to date casually at 16, she went out with a boy in her class. He was a nice looking kid, but from a family of weirdos. The boy became obsessed with my sister, waiting for her outside school, telephoning constantly, and following her home trying to get her to like him. One night my sister noticed him standing across the street from our house in the shadows of some trees. He was just staring into our house. My sister got scared. I noticed how dad slipped quietly out the back door. Sneaking to a darkened window, I watched as dad went down the alley behind our house, crossed the street and strolled up the sidewalk to where the boy was hiding behind a tree. My dad, who was 6 feet 3 inches tall and weighed about 230 pounds, came up behind the boy, who was about 5 foot 10 inches, and grasped him by the back of the neck. I saw dad turn the boy to face him and get in his face, talking quietly. The boy shook his head no a few times, then nodded yes a few more times. Dad pointed down the street and released the boy, who walked quickly away, never looking back. Dad casually crossed the street and came in. My mom asked, "Where have you been?" "Oh, I just got somewhere," Dad answered. Nobody else had seen this. My sister said the boy never bothered her again. Best dad ever. My first year of college, I had a huge birthday party. The one person that I didn't personally invite blacked out, walked into a house a few doors down, took his shirt off and sat in a closet until the dude who lived there found him. The residents were unbelievably cool considering the situation and kind of laughed it off. So blackout kid comes back to the party, continues being a huge butt, trying to fight people, making girls uncomfortable. Typical douchey college bro stuff. Finally there are a few of us left, ready to crash. The person whose house we were at said something like, "Does anyone need any pillows or blankets?" and blackout bro yells, "Frick you, you piece of crap." I'm a fairly pacifist type of person, but 4 or 5 of us looked at each other and somehow, without ever vocalizing it, like we all just knew what we were gonna do, grabbed him, duct taped him to a plastic chair, and left him on the porch until morning. When we woke up and went out to free him, he was completely silent and had the most embarrassed and regretful look I've ever seen a person have. He probably had no memory what he'd done and thought you all were a bunch of buttholes. My brother had a friend who was a kleptomaniac. He stole things that made absolutely no sense. He stole my Dalmatian backpack that I loved. Mother was P and he was never allowed back in the house. When I caught him stealing money from my mom's jar, it was emergency money we had in case something happened. My mom ended up calling his dad on what happened. I stopped talking to him after that. My little sister was forever banned from a friend's house in high school after she got extremely drunk and ended up puking all over herself in this house and then passed out with no pants on, which happened right when her friend's mom unexpectedly came home early. Then my sister woke up and tried to talk to the mom. Oops. We lived on a farm and my best friend came to stay for the first time. We were outside in the field when we found a blind rabbit. We went to call my dad, who came out to investigate. I was pretty used to this sight by now. There's a common rabbit disease in the UK called myxomatosis, which is a slow and miserable death for a rabbit. The best thing to do is put it down immediately. So that's what my dad did. Picked it up and twisted its neck. I don't know why neither me or my dad warned her that it was about to happen, but she was crying non-stop until her mum came to pick her up. She's still my best friend, but her parents never let her stay again. Unrelated, but hey, my username is finally relevant. I was about 14. I had just made a new friend and was excited to have her over for a sleepover. My parents set us up in the basement so we can watch TV and be loud without waking them up and just have fun. She saw my mom's new digital camera and decided to have a photo shoot. Sure, why not? She took a few normal pictures of me and had me take some of her, and then we awkwardly took some pictures together. A few hours later, maybe 11 PM, my parents are asleep and my older brother comes home. We decide to go on Facebook and talk to some of her guy friends. He asks us to call him. She obliged, but we didn't have cell phones at 14, so she used my parents' landline. She was talking to him alone, so I only heard her side, but it was really flirty things like, yeah, we can make out and maybe you can touch my boobs. I got weirded out, so went to watch TV while she was talking to this guy, and out of nowhere, my brother comes down and tells us to get off the phone and go to bed or he's going to tell my parents. She gets off the phone and that's that. Or so I think. About a week later, my parents call me and demand to speak to me. They were looking through my mom's camera and came across the pictures from that night. Apparently, after I'd gone to sleep, she decided to use my mom's camera to take some sexy pictures of herself. I don't know what she did or planned to do with them, but there were about 30 pictures of her wearing less and less clothes until she's completely naked. I started crying, saying that I didn't know. I was asleep. I told them about the phone call and had my brother tell them I wasn't involved. I was just watching TV and wanting to go to sleep. Needless to say, I wasn't too sad about not seeing her again. Yikes, child pornography. Remember Pop Rocks? The broken up rock candy that crackles in your mouth? They were all the rage when I was in 3rd grade. I lamented my longing for Pop Rocks to my dad. Turns out he worked for the company that made Pop Rocks. He was thrilled to feel like a superhero to his little girl, and that Christmas I got a manufacturer's box full of Pop Rocks. There were probably 100 packages of Pop Rocks, and I felt like the coolest kid ever, marking it rain and giving them to my friends. As spring broke, the neighbor kid John came over. He saw the box full of Pop Rocks. Before I could stop him, he grabbed the box and ran outside. I chased him down to the creek near our house and got there just as he flipped the box upside down and emptied the contents into the creek. My heart broke as the reason for my newfound popularity crackled, fizzled, and faded away in the sunlight. I asked him why and he said he just wanted to see what would happen. My dad asked what happened to all the Pop Rocks and I didn't have the heart to tell him. But I didn't let John into my house after that. What a turd. My brother used to have a very expensive drum kit in our garage. One afternoon my younger sister has some friends over. They're all about 13, just messing around and hanging out. Uneventful as far as we knew. Until the next day my brother goes to play and one of his cymbals is missing. And the expensive one too. No sign of it, it's just been lifted. Didn't take CSI to figure out one of my sister's friends must have taken it as nobody else had access. My dad, normally a very short-tempered man, calmly asked my sister for the phone numbers of her friends. He calls each one and explains that he is so and so's father and one of their cymbals has gone missing. If they know anything about it being misplaced, could they let him know? No questions asked. Or he will call the police and pass on their details as the last known house guests. He adds some stuff about us leaving the garage untouched so they can dust for prints etc etc. Miraculously one of the boys texts him to say he has it. My dad arranges to meet him, alone. Doesn't take my bro or sis to avoid an emotional exchanges, and the cymbal is returned. The boy mutters some excuse about getting mixed up and thinking it was his, but my dad stays calm and says it's all fine now. But obviously he is under no circumstances welcome in our house anymore, and if my dad ever sees him there again he will physically pick him up and toss him into the street. She locked my sister and I in a zip-up hamper, then proceeded to kick us. She also got bit by our rats after being told multiple times that she wasn't allowed to hold them. Apparently her thumb was infected and she had to go to the ear. Her mom wanted my mom to pay the medical bill. I think I was that kid. In middle school I thought that The Hills Have Eyes would be an appropriate movie for my Friday the 13th birthday. 15 prepubescent screaming girls later and I never hosted another birthday party. I did this too. Except my friends weren't little B, so we all still hung out. He came into my house to play N64 while my brother and I were at school. My mom apparently left the door open while she showered, so he just came in and made himself at home. I don't know why he thought this was okay. We were in 5th grade. He asked to use the washroom and then wiped crap on the walls and on the sink and stuff. I went to his house and told his dad, and then the kid came over to clean it up. He didn't do a good job though. After reading you went to his house, I thought you shat all over his place in revenge. Guess you did the more diplomatic thing though. So one time, this new neighbor wanted to introduce their granddaughter to everyone on the block cause she'd be visiting a lot. Anyways, the little girl was a basic brat but we let her come over and freak up our toys anyway. Then she had to go to the bathroom. She didn't come out for a good 30 minutes. When she did, she said she had to go and left. My sister and I wondered why she was in there so long, so we went to investigate. That little crap not only left her diarrhea stained panties in our toilet, but also left a bunch of handprints that were definitely not paint all over the walls and the toilet seat and the bathtub and pretty much the whole bathroom. My mum was pee. She wasn't phased while cleaning it because she's seen worse, but then she went over to the neighbor's house and forbid that girl to ever set foot in our house again. Mums are so badass and nonchalant about poop. No matter what, I've seen worse. Who was the worst house guest you ever had over? I was in kindergarten and my brothers invited a friend over to play the newest Madden game. After they got done playing, the friend decided to go home, so my mom drove him. While he left, my brothers told my dad that our Madden game was missing. We spent a good time looking for it but couldn't find it. My dad believed my brother's friend took it, so he went over to his house and what do you know? He stole it. He was banned from the house and the friendship ended. I never liked him tbh since I was too young to care about friendship. My daughter had a friend like that, only it was her own mother who caught her stealing from us and made her write an apology letter. I accepted it, but never had her over again, and shed no tears when she moved away soon after that. The house guests that rearranged our furniture and artwork while we were away to surprise us with their good taste. Not my house but my car. I don't have many rules for passengers when I'm driving, but there are two I will never budge on. 1. Wear your seatbelt. 2. Do not smoke in my car. I had just bought a car. It wasn't brand new but I knew the previous and only owner, and I knew he was a car guy who took meticulous care of his cars inside and out. He wouldn't even sell me the car before he had given the engine a proper service. Within a week of getting the car, a friend asked for a lift to the train station. I knew he smoked, so as we walked to the car I told him specifically to wait until we get to the station before he lights up. A 10-minute ride at most. I back out of the parking spot, drive to the exit of the parking lot, and as I check my left hand side for oncoming cars I hear from my right the distinctive sound of a lighter sparking up. Dude could not even freaking wait until we were out of the freaking car park before he just had to have his goddamn cigarette. I ask him what the heck he thinks he's doing and he just looks at me and says relax. It's not like it's a new car. Sucker ended up walking to the train station. Sucker ended up walking to the train station. Satisfying. I don't let people eat or smoke in my car. It's not the greatest, but it's mine. I would have done the same thing. My half sister. She and her brood moved in with my dad and stepmom. She is 48, married and has 4 kids and a dog. 25, 21, 16 and 14 years old, and is lazy as frick. She doesn't do laundry, cook, clean or even clean up the crap her dog takes on the rug. All because she is a guest. My dad's house now smells and looks like an episode of Hoarders. I invited my dad and stepmom over for dinner a few days ago. They showed up and less than a minute later my sister and her kids, just the two not in college, were on my front porch. She followed my dad to my house and decided she was having dinner with us. She then proceeded to call me a horrible cook, housekeeper, and parent. My house was critiqued by her, and well, me, my family and my house failed her standards test. Oh, and for bonus points she decided to bring up my oldest son's medical condition, an ultra rare treatable condition, by saying if it was her kid she wouldn't have been able to handle having a sick kid. She would have let them go instead of selfishly keeping them alive. My son is 4, he got sick at 2. He has a few medical needs but he is 100% normal and okay. One of my mom's friends found out I had autism and fetal alcohol syndrome when I was 8 years old. My mom's friend proceeds to say, why don't you put him up for adoption so you can live a normal life? According to my grandmother, my mom looked at her, said get the frick out of my house and never come back, pushed her out of the house and slammed the door. A friend stayed over after a night of partying, as we were in no state to drive. During the night, my flat got flooded. He watched me clean up the water for a couple of hours, with his feet up on the sofa, smoking my cigarettes. Then he has the audacity to tell me, bro, drop me home. I'm getting bored. Mother, walk home. Freaking heck. Bro, I feel so bad for you. I'd be on my hands and knees trying to help. Probably make it worse, but I'd at least try. My mother-in-law. Particularly because she showed up uninvited and let herself in with a copy of our keys she'd got made when my soul left them there, then proceeded to blame us for her copying her key because family should be allowed to walk in and out as they please. My parents were kinda broke when I was young, and because of that, one summer for around a month all I had to wear on my feet were these tatty old boots with holes in the soles, and when they got wet they made my feet super smelly. Well, it was a particularly hot summer and I was around 13. After being out doing normal kid stuff, my friend invited me to stay at his for the night. Come the end of the night I take the boots off in the room I'm staying in and go to bed. As I'm drifting off, the dad peeks in as he is going to bed and says, "You are one smelly little boy." I was their worst house guest. Haha, my son has friends like this, and I am pretty sure my son's feet smell too. It's normal. My mother's sister. My parents and her went on a night out, came back, most of us were asleep. Mum went to bed. She ended up having sex with my dad. Long story short, she's not a good house guest. Yeah, and sorry to say it, but your dad kinda sucks too. My in-laws. They're both inconsiderate slobs. Phil has to monopolize the TV 24/7, while Mill won't lift a finger to clean up after herself. Also, once she was making herself a sandwich, licked the mayonnaise off of her knife, which she then proceeded to stick in the mustard jar. Add to that she'll never offer to pay, meaning she'll never just say, "I've got this. Put your money away." She'll instead ask with this weak tone in her voice, "Do you want me to pay for that?" because she knows if she asks that way my wife will say no. It annoys the crap out of both of us. I always answer questions like that with, "If you would like to, I would appreciate it." Some years ago a girlfriend of mine visited me in the city I lived at that time. We slept at my boyfriend's place where he lives with a roommate. She was rude the whole time, making stupid jokes about the guys and said they couldn't cook just because they used powdered chicken brew as an ingredient. I escorted her to the rail station the next morning, but she forgot her phone charger and we hadn't enough time to get it before the train arrived. So my boyfriend rushed with his bicycle to bring it to us. She never said once thanks. Not for the food they cooked her, not for the provided bed, and not for her stupid charger. After 1 year passed, I decided to invite her again, because my boyfriend and me moved together in a beautiful and amazing apartment. She came with her new lover from which we never heard anything before, and her untrained dog. I didn't say anything as it climbed on our couch drained in rain from outside. But what made me furious was her not batting an eye as her dog started to dig with its claws into our couch. Not only doesn't she respect other people or their effort for her and their belongings, but she is fully incapable of raising and training an animal or caring for it. Her visits were the drop in the bucket to end this friendship. I couldn't take her personality any longer. Sorry, my English isn't good and I can't describe how awful she was. When I read my post it seems pretty innocent, but I'm just lost for words and it makes me still mad thinking about it. She honestly sounds terrible and your English is very good. My wife's 4 friends had stayed over after a party because they lived pretty far away. I was in the kitchen making coffee in the morning and the friend's wife came up the basement stairs into the kitchen wearing nothing but her underwear. She didn't say anything to me, she just shuffled past and went back into the spare bedroom. I was curious what she was doing down there, so I went and I checked. It turns out in her drunken state she couldn't find either one of the bathrooms upstairs on the main level, so she went into the basement and crapped beneath the stairs all over the floor. When her husband came out of the bedroom I told him that he had a mess to clean up and directed him to the basement so he could find his wife's surprise. That's when he decided to use our clean bath towels to smear her crap all over my basement floor. Then he just tossed the towels into the laundry tub. I never spoke to either one of them again. One good thing did come out of it though. We now get to say crap the basement drunk as the top of the drunkenness meter. Banned. What the frick? That's absolutely horrible. I had a family member come stay with us for a few weeks. We had the spare bedroom upstairs set up and ready for them with a bed and TV. Said family member decided the spare bedroom wasn't good enough and decided to turn the entire lower floor where our entertainment room is into their own apartment instead. They didn't use the bed a single time. That was pretty infuriating. When I was a teenager I always insisted it was fine I could just sleep on the couch. Someone else could have the bed so no one had to share. Now as an adult who's couch guests it occurs to me how much of an inconvenience someone crashing in your living room is. My aunt and her brother, let's call him Ab, came over to visit my family. He was notoriously cheap. Like he brought a rice cooker to a public bathroom to use the water and electricity to cook rice cheap. Although he was a millionaire, he also been trying to set his daughters up with my brother, which is why he came over. We decided to buy 3 family-sized Popeyes set and 3 gallons of OJ. Don't ask. Very Asian. For 8 people lunch. Thinking we'll have at least 1 set left over for my aunt to bring home for my uncle because Popeyes was very new to our state at the time. Between my family of 4, we maybe ate half a box of chicken, half of the sides that came with it, and half 1/4 gallon of juice. Ab proceeded to eat 2 full boxes of family-sized Popeyes, ate all the sides that came with it, and drank 2 gallons of juice. His wife had to stop him because he was eating so fast that she thought he was going to choke, and Ab was giving dirty looks to people who went back for a second piece of chicken. After all that was consumed, he went to our bathroom and completely destroyed our toilet. Poop everywhere. On the toilet seat, under the toilet seat, rim of the toilet, on the ground around the toilet, and on our bathroom vanity side, next to the toilet. He also clogged the toilet and tried to unclog it I guess. The plunger was covered in feces and toilet paper on the ground. He walked downstairs like nothing happens and didn't say anything. He then proceeded to eat half a platter of fruit I just had served. I guess it was probably 3 oranges, 2 apples, and a quarter of watermelon. I was very taken back when I went to the bathroom and had to discreetly grab my mom to show her. I end up having to clean it up because my mom didn't want to make a scene of it. Still a bit traumatized. He wouldn't leave until we ordered a huge dinner for at least 12 people and proceed to take all the food once it was brought home. He was never invited back to our house. My husband's mother. We haven't spoken to her in a few years. She was banished from every Catholic church within 100 miles of her home in S.E., Michigan. She ended up going to a Korean church where nobody spoke English, so nobody dealt with her. She finally moved to Cincy and has been there since. She visited after I had my first daughter. She wouldn't freaking leave. She stayed for 2 weeks. She thought she was helping by going to Dollar Tree and finding organizers and completely rearranging my kitchen. I still randomly find things where they do not belong from her makeover. I also will toss my now deceased uncle in the ring as well. He took a Amtrak from Cali to Michigan after his brother, my other uncle, died. Dead of winter, and it ended up taking 5 days for them to arrive. He was about 6'4" and no less than 650 pounds. He brought his equally large and smelly son with him. I figured they would be in town for about a week. No biggie. Nope. They stayed at my house for 10 days, until my husband told them to shower or get the heck out. I had to throw away my recliner he had been sitting on. He broke the tie rod to my husband's car and the CV to my minivan. We told him to go rent a U-Haul pickup to drive because I couldn't handle it anymore. He ended up staying nearly a month in town, but after 10 days, my husband's grandfather died and we had to go to Ohio for the funeral, so they had to leave. They stayed at my sister's house and apparently they showered regularly and she had no complaints. But her house also always smells of wet dog and poop. So gross and gross. My now ex-husband and I rented a room to one of his co-workers. His co-worker never washed his hands, so there would be dirty handprints on every railing or door handle from the front door up to his room. He never showered. He would have a bath roughly once a week. This left my white tub a grey color with a black ring all around the top. He never flushed, so this left my white toilet a nasty brown color. The first time I saw the bathroom after he had been there for a week or so, I cried. He smelled awful. He played hockey a couple times a week but still would just have a bath about once a week. So it was very hard to be around him if he wanted to spend time out of his room. He never cooked, just ate chips or fast food in his room and left the garbage in there until my husband would tell him it was time to clean it out before we got bugs. It was awful. My parents. So many rigid rules about everything in their house with the added "you will obey the rules of my house or leave" attitude. They come to my house and, especially my dad, treats it however he wants. Muddy shoes? He's okay walking on your carpets. Tired? He's not, so you aren't going to bed. Nor is he leaving. Hungry? They'll demand you cater to their wants, even when they aren't invited to eat. It was at that point I realized it wasn't the house rules he wanted followed, but himself. You need to take a page out of his book. You will obey the rules of my house or leave. I don't give a frick who you are. No one disrespects me in my own home. Absolutely without a doubt one of my younger brother's friends from high school. Before he moved in with us, he seemed like a fine enough kid from a less than ideal home situation. His mom jumped from boyfriend to boyfriend and decided to move across the country midway through his junior year of high school. If he went with her, he would have ended up delaying his graduation by 6 months a year. So my parents offered to let him stay with us. To frame the rest of the story, and to explain how much I dislike this kid, the TLDR is that he's the reason my dog is dead. This kid was the worst type of house guest, incredibly possessive of his space, which he would basically bar whenever he was gone, even though his room was the only way for us to get to the hot water heater and boiler. He behaved like a neat freak, but was secretly a huge slob. He hid half-finished beers underneath the bathroom sink for a year, and the types of bugs that gathered pretty much ruined the lower floor of the house. He would sit on his bed and smoke so much weed, and then completely pretend that it didn't happen. Even when we found a lit bowl sitting next to him, he would ask my parents for money constantly. His mother decided he needed nothing at all since he wasn't her problem anymore, and then spent it on drugs or on building a $1,000 gaming PC. Here's the awful John Wick, old yellow bit of it all. He constantly ate chicken wings and would leave the bones just on the floor next to his bed, persistently, for months, even after my mother asked him not to. One morning, he dropped his 10-piece wing bones scattered around his bed like a crappy Santeria ritual, and my dog found them. He was downstairs getting ready from school, saw my dog choking, and just walked out to the bus. Didn't tell anyone. My mom found my dog's body about 30 minutes later. He never apologized, never even acted like it was his fault. He just stopped talking to everyone in the family and ignored us to our faces. He moved out in the middle of the night, stealing the mattress he was sleeping on to go to his aunt's house. 2 years later, we found him pee drunk sleeping on our porch, covered in his own vomit. When I told him he had to go right now before someone found him and called the cops, he shouted "H-U-B" at me, threw up all over the floor and my shoes, took his vomit white jeans off on the deck, and wandered away. His name is basically a swear word in our house. It has been years, and honestly I cannot find it in myself to forgive him. He killed my Buster, and he didn't even have the decency to own up to it. Good God, my dad, mom, myself would have literally tried to kill him if he did that to one of our dogs. That's terrible. We allowed a friend of ours to stay the night once because he was down on his luck. He proceeds to invite his girlfriend over to stay the night without asking us, and they were laughing and being loud late into the night while I was trying to sleep. I had work early the next morning. Needless to say, he never came over again. They totally had sex on your couch. A friend of my husband's. He was the house guest that never wanted to leave. He has a wife and a kid but still insisted on coming over to our house every day for hours at a time without them. He was borderline stalkerish, called my husband at least 10 times a day when he wasn't over, which wasn't often. It's like he wanted to be married to my husband and not his wife. He was the most annoying house guest ever who never wanted to leave us alone. Guy probably hated being at home and didn't have any other friends. Kinda sad actually. Had a roommate in college who decided to let his brother come and stay with us for close to a month. These two buttholes did nothing but drink 40s and play Madden all day. The worst was when I came home to find a crock pot of chili I made for a work party completely devoured, with the note still on the lid asking for it to not be eating. When I called them on that balls, they both tried to pick a fight with me. One night they go out, get crap faced, and the brother brings home the single trashiest woman I have ever seen in my life and then proceeds to have very loud and smelly sex on the couch in the living room. I moved out a month later. I'm sorry you had to deal with that balls, but loud and smelly sex had me in tears of laughter. I used to have a regular dinner get together with a friend and her boyfriend on Sundays, alternating between her place and mine. When we went to her place, she'd be super anal about keeping the place clean, making us clean up before we left, which was fine. Whatever. They'd come over to my place, and the two of them would be slobs. I guess because we weren't as tidy as she was, so why bother? The worst offense being when she dropped a french fry and started grinding it into the carpet with her foot. I told her to stop and she just said whatever, the place is a mess anyways. Added bonus that eventually she stopped having me over because she didn't want to have to deal with cleaning. My aunt was going to stay with us for a couple months and find a job in our area. She's been living here since early 2017 and only started looking for jobs in March of this year. And TBH, I'm not fully sure she's actually applying to them because she hasn't had a single interview. She had a mental breakdown this past winter and thought her phone was being tapped and we were all secretly recording her around the house. If she saw you holding your phone or near a phone, she'd rush out of the room. She came into my room uninvited once to check for recording devices in my smoke detector. At one point she wasn't speaking to anyone and would write messages in a little notebook and burn them once they had been read. Sometimes she would start screaming for no reason. Sometimes it was hysterical crying and sometimes she'd just stand and stare. One time I found her standing outside my bedroom door at 1 AM. She would also stay up until 3 or 4 AM and just stare at the muted TV in the living room with all the lights on. It got to the point where I legitimately did not feel safe in my own house, but it's not like we could tell her to leave and put her on the street. She refused help for a long time, but she's fine now and sees a psych regularly. But I've realized that even without the mental illness I still hate being around her. She's a know-it-all. She's constantly interrupting. She's ever present to the point that I can't have financial discussions with my mom in person and I have to text her about it instead. She literally follows me around the house and will stand in the kitchen watching me as I make myself lunch. I can't stand it. And being someone who doesn't have a job, she literally never leaves the house. Even when I think I'm alone, she's here, just being very quiet. She's probably going to live here until I'm dead because my parents don't have the backbone to ask her to leave. This is the third time a house guest has significantly overstayed their welcome. TLDR. My aunt overstayed her welcome by a year, and counting, and had a paranoid breakdown over the winter that led to us feeling unsafe in our own home. Wow, this sounds awful for you. Hope it gets better soon. My brother-in-law. He's the most socially awkward person I know, and as a result he's almost unbearable to host because he's obsessed with food. He wakes up thinking about what to have for breakfast, while also planning what he'll have for his other meals. While eating he'll also tell you about how the food could be made better, which doesn't really stop him from eating everything he sees. Seriously, he thinks leftovers are a sin, I think. He's not quiet about bodily noises, mouth breathing while chewing, belching, snorting, blowing nose, etc. It's gross. He's pretty short with my kids, 5-year-old twins. He'll go from happy-go-lucky uncle to yelling at them in about half a second. When he goes to the bathroom he's in there for about 40 minutes, not exaggerating. While in there, he'll also be watching YouTube on his phone without headphones, volume blasting. He falls asleep with all of the lights on, and his phone still playing YouTube. He listens to music TV on his phone without headphones, regardless of what anyone else is doing. He makes regular commentary on what you're watching talking about, and if you're watching a movie he'll constantly quote it and guffaw when he's right. My husband's ex-co-worker friend. He gave us a sob story about how he had nowhere to live, no car, money, etc. So we gave him our upstairs rent-free, a job, gave him access to our car and gave him groceries. He'd been a roommate before and was amazing, but he found his new GF and raving with 18-year-olds. At 26, he quit the job after we were close to firing him. Thank God, because they'd be working out of town and he'd share a room with someone and blast music and turn on all the lights until 3 AM. We found out he stole his dad's credit card to go see an out-of-town rave for him and his GF. Didn't have a way there or back, just expected us to give him our car for the weekend. So after about a month of not doing anything to better his situation, we noticed this girl around more and more. Turns out he moved his GF in without telling us and just expected us to just include her in our generosity. We weren't impressed, and it got worse when I found empty pills in a drawer when I was looking for some documents that were in a drawer next to his bed. Didn't think this was a permanent situation at first. Then she very deliberately flashed her butt when she thought I couldn't see to my now husband while we were cuddling on the couch together. He nearly kicked them both out that night after that bulls. I had to calm him down. We never told him about the incident. No freaking idea why, but my husband wouldn't let me, and we gave them a deadline to move out after that. I think the reasoning your husband followed regarding not telling his friend about his girlfriend flashing him her butt is that his friend would probably be depressed and more of a frick up if he broke up with her, and probably would try to use that to remain living with you. I had family come over that couldn't control their freaking kids. Were trying to see who could beat the record of jumping from the highest point in the stairs to my bottom floor. A distant in-law asked to stay with us along with his pregnant wife. They were having issues with people from the past and wanted to get away. When they got here, we realized they didn't intend on going back. We discussed they'd stay a month, and after that they needed to chip in. Dude sat on my couch for a month watching Netflix while his overdue preggo wife cleaned the house while I was at work. Eventually me and the wife found him a job and the baby was born. My so tells him, hey, a month is up. If you're going to stay, we need half of rent and utilities. He got offended that we stuck to the agreed upon plan instead of letting him mooch. We thought he'd take his family back home, but they stayed in town. When they moved out, I found their placenta in a drawer. That really took a left turn at the last line. Okay, so I know I'm stupid for even being in this situation, but I met a guy online. We were really clicking for a couple months when he asked if he could come see me. He tells me he doesn't have a car, so I'll need to pick him up at the bus station. That was fine with me, so I pick him up, expecting him to leave that night as we had planned. Turns out he had other plans. It was a Friday and he hadn't purchased his ticket home until Tuesday and never told me how long he planned to stay. He was good looking, but the entire time he was there he was on his phone. Took random pictures of my apartment and posted it on Facebook saying this was his vacation. I had a doctor appointment the next day that I wasn't planning on him being in the way of. Against my better judgment, I left him there so I could go to my appointment. When I returned, I could hear him talking about some kind of strange business before I even hit the front door. He had also smoked a bunch of cigarettes in my apt after being asked to go outside to do that. I was pee and that was the last straw. I told him we needed to talk and that I wasn't feeling him in any sort of way and that I wanted him out. He seemed shocked and kept insisting that he couldn't return home. There were no buses until Tuesday. It was Saturday at this point. He then said if I wanted to buy him a new ticket, he would go. I lied and told him I had bought a ticket and there was a bus leaving the station soon at his home 2 hours away. I got halfway to the bus station and he claims he left his freaking gold clip-in grill on my table in a paper towel and he was not leaving town without it. I turned around to get it for him because he was so untidy and I was cleaning up after him. I had actually thrown away the grill in the paper towel and fished it out of the trash. We got to THR bus station. He figured out I didn't buy our ticket and there were no buses going toward his home. I threatened to call the cops so he would get out of my car after an hour of arguing. Finally ditched that dude. Really didn't care what happened to him. Worst house guest ever. My roommate's boyfriend thought all the meat in my freezer was expired and threw it away. When I came home from work, it was too late. It was a hot day and he did this right after I left for work, so the meat was not salvageable. $100 is $1 of perfectly good meat gone to waste. Needless to say, I was pissed, and I made him buy me new meat. I am so glad someone in this thread got their stuff back. I let my best friend stay with me when he became homeless. Over the course of the year he was there, he knocked a huge hole in the wall in his room. He repaired said hole and did a crap job. Did a horrendous paint job on the wall he knocked a hole in. Got stains on all of the other walls because he worked at a factory and never washed his dang grubby hands. He also rarely showered. The stench from his room permeated the whole house. And he barely did anything to take care of the cat he brought with him, which I happily picked up the slack on. I love cats and that cat was a sweetheart. He also left the stove burners on after he was done cooking several times. He'd forget to turn off lights. He had to have his co-worker drive him to work for a reason I can't remember. He had a working vehicle, and most of the time he couldn't even wake up for work on time, so his co-worker would come knocking on the front door, waking me up earlier than I had to be up. Disclaimer: I don't mean to say this guy was a jerk. He was actually very kind and apologetic when he broke something or messed up, and he kept to himself most of the time. He was just really unlucky and forgetful. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.